Introduction: I am a rabbit spirit in the mountains. In order to repay a favor, I pretended to be a child's cousin. Cousin, child of your brother, sister, or mother's sister, we have lived together for many years. He was born a crybaby with a weak personality. After he passed the imperial examination, he insisted on marrying me. When I refused, he knelt down, eyes red with tears, and begged, Sister, please have mercy on me. I can't live without her." After we got married, I once accidentally heard him talking to a servant. After all, women are still soft-hearted. If she doesn't like you, then you should make her pity you. If you like someone, even if you die, you must have her. At that time, the handsome county magistrate of Tontrai County was leisurely feeding the fish. He slightly raised his lips and smiled softly. His appearance was gentle and kind. Back Sun was where Huainan Vong Fai ascended to immortality. King Huainan Luan, courtesy name Gonggon, was the grandson of Emperor Gaozu. Emperor Gaozu, the founding emperor. He was not only well-versed in literature and the ancient zither, but also knowledgeable in the alchemy of the immortals. He had thousands of magicians serving him. Magician, a person who practices magic and studies divination and exorcism. Historical records show that in the first year of Yuan Shu, King Huainan committed suicide because of a failed rebellion. However, we all know that at that time Gonggon and 8 other immortals had successfully refined the elixir. He did not die, but instead ate the elixir and became an immortal. You wonder who we are? We are the monsters living in Beishan, Huainan. I am a rabbit spirit, named Xiaoya. A long, long time ago, I was just an ordinary rabbit. Of course, my father was also just an ordinary rabbit. We lived on a deserted mountainside, in a secret, hidden cave. We ate green grass, wild vegetables, and in the barren winter, we ate grassroots and lichen. Actually, my favorite food was radishes and green vegetables. Pumpkins were also delicious, but they often grew in the fields halfway up the mountain that were cleared by farmers. My father and I had agreed not to go to the other side of the mountain. The cave on the deserted mountainside had only 2 rabbits, my father and I. We didn't live here before. We used to live in a large cave near the stream, where there were also my brothers, sisters, and neighbors. Later, we were constantly caught by foxes, bitten by wolves, and at some point, a pair of extremely terrifying snake monsters appeared in the forest. After suffering countless casualties, everyone moved away, and my father also brought the last rabbit in the family, me, to this desolate mountainside to dig a cave to live. That was 800 years ago, so long that I had forgotten what my father looked like. If I had forgotten, then that was fine. After all, in the eyes of humans, most rabbits in this world were the same. 2 long ears, a small, pretty mouth, and red eyes. My father was the most common rabbit. He was the rabbit that I once stole radishes from when I was little, and dragged it all the way to the cave to feed me. When I returned, that rabbit had lost a leg, and was bleeding profusely. The 2 of us huddled together, trembling, and agreed to never steal radishes again. But my father didn't remember for long, and not many years later, he dragged his crippled leg and gave me another item he had stolen, half a pill. In the first year of Han Yuan Shu, King Huainan and 8 immortals refined elixirs in the mountains. After they ascended, they laughed loudly and scattered the remaining elixirs to the dogs, chickens, and ducks raised in the courtyard. Thanks to that, all the livestock raised became immortals. Dogs flew into the sky, chickens crowed in the clouds. This shocking scene was seen by a wild monkey in the mountains. It snatched the last elixir and ran into the forest. Afterwards, it died in the hands of the snake monster. The pair of snake monsters cultivating together were a pair of venomous snakes. The venomous snakes had sharp thorns containing deadly poison in their bellies. They had cultivated for 300 years. If they had enough time, they would have successfully transformed into a dragon. However, a complete elixir would help one of them skip the stage of becoming a dragon, and it would immediately become a true dragon. True dragon, pure dragon. But the feelings of the two snake monsters were very deep. They did not want to enjoy the elixir alone, so they split into two halves. The female snake monster ate half of the elixir first. My father hid in the forest and saw with his own eyes that it evolved into a slender-necked, sharp-headed dragon. The dragon grew claws, and thin membranes continued to grow between its claws. Finally, it screamed and writhed on the ground, its claws turning into limbs, and gradually from half human, half dragon it became the shape of a complete human. For a moment, my father was extremely frightened. But immediately his red eyes suddenly burst into a burning fire. I think many things must have appeared and flashed through his mind in that moment. Rabbits born in this world must have a very miserable survival. They are forever prey for wolves and tigers, food on human plates, like fish on chopping boards. An existence that both humans and animals can bully and bully. We are so small. Because of a radish, he had one of his legs bitten off by a dog. Because of half a pill, he lost his life. Until now, I still cannot imagine how he was able to muster up all his courage at that time, taking advantage of the male snake monster's lack of vigilance, rushing out like crazy to snatch the other half of the pill. The moment my father returned to the cave on the deserted mountainside, he had also used up the last of his strength. At that time, my father was covered in blood, and his head was about to be severed from his body. Before he could even look at me one last time, he fell to the ground and breathed his last. My name is Lu Xiaoye. To begin the story, I ate half of the elixir that my father rabbit had stolen. My father was a normal rabbit, with long ears and a small, pretty mouth. Oh, right, and red eyes. I am a rabbit spirit who has been cultivating in the mountains for 800 years. I named myself Lu Xiaoye. I took the surname Lu because of the half of the elixir I ate that was refined by King Luan of Huainan. I named myself Xiaoye because I have always admired the jade rabbit at the base of the cinnamon tree on the Moon Palace. That was my goal for cultivating to become an immortal. As for my original wish when I first started cultivating, I have already forgotten it, which was that I did not want my father rabbit to die in vain. I left the desolate mountainside a long time ago, and moved to a cave with 3 caves deep in the mountains. This 3 cave was very close to the temple of the land god, and there was also a lush locust tree beside it. The temple of the land god here was both low and shabby, and it was very messy inside, and there was even a rat's nest on the altar. The land god here had passed away 100 years ago. Because there were rumors that there were man-eating beasts in the deep mountains, gradually no one came here to worship. So I could only watch helplessly as the local god, the god who lived off the incense of mortals, starved to death. Every time a sudden mountain wind blew by, the locust tree in front of the cave would sway, giving off a fragrant scent. Sometimes I would be at the entrance of the cave making pills, sometimes I would rest my chin on my hand, absent-mindedly standing in the low shrine. Occasionally, there would be people who were at their wits' end, willing to run to the local god's shrine and kowtow twice. At those times, I would happily help them. I, Lu Xiaoye, only wanted to cultivate immortality. In order to do good deeds and accumulate virtue, I once helped a filial son who came here to ask for medicine, gave beggars food, and also saved a girl who was hanging herself in the forest. I have cultivated for 800 years, and I see myself as a beautiful and kind rabbit, never bullying the weak. Therefore, the little demons in Beishan all respect me. They all affectionately call me Sister Yu. But I also have mortal enemies, which are the pair of poisonous snakes that always cultivate together. The male snake demon is called Lu Wangqing, also known as General Lu. The female snake demon is called Yung. Yung also ate half of the elixir like me, and has cultivated for 1,000 years now, so she should be able to transform into a true dragon. Unfortunately, she cannot let go of Lu Wangqing. They still hold a grudge for me eating half of the elixir, and have never given up on hunting me down. The more I am chased, the more cunning I become, and thanks to that, I have developed an excellent ability to escape. One time, after drinking the wine that Xiao Huayao had brewed for me, I rashly ran to their cave, put my hands on my hips, and shouted loudly, "Let me see what you can do. Come out here and die. You big snake." Before they could react, I had already run away on all fours, so agitated that my heart was pounding like crazy. I had only done something like rushing to my death once. Lu Wangqing and Yuan Ji were not people who could be easily provoked. Lu Wangqing was very vicious and cruel. After making a deal, he dared to eat anything to increase his cultivation. Yuan Ji was also implicated, because she helped him cultivate. She had too much killing karma on her hands, and she was increasingly deviating from the righteous path. In the eyes of the wild monsters in this mountain region, they were extremely terrifying evil beings. Besides Xiao Huayao, there was also the locust tree spirit in front of the cave, who was my best friend. The locust tree spirit was called Xiaohua. It had no cultivation, and all day long it waved its branches and leaves and said to me, "Xiaoyu, sister, today General Lu ate another person. Don't go and provoke them." Of course I didn't dare to provoke them. The most terrible way to take revenge I could think of was to quickly cultivate into an immortal, then fly up to the sky to complain to the immortals up there. TSK, alright, even though I had eaten half a pill and cultivated for 800 years, I still couldn't win against Lu Wangqing or Yuan Ji alone. Especially when I fought Yuan Ji. I am a good rabbit, always cultivating. But why is the path to immortality so difficult? One day, I met Lu Wangqing in the forest. Luckily, Yuan Ji wasn't there. Not lucky at all. For 800 years I have been hiding from them. My ability to escape is extremely excellent, but now I can't escape. I transformed into a white rabbit and tried to run, but he transformed into a snake and chased after me, using his snake body to wrap around me tightly. My rabbit body was squeezed very tightly, so tightly that my whole body was distorted. My red eyes were squeezed extremely hard, as if they were about to pop out. The pain was excruciating. How ridiculous, after cultivating for so long, yet in the moment of life and death, I didn't fight him with my magic power, but instead used my primitive animal instincts. His snake body coiled tighter and tighter, not daring to lower his guard, afraid that I would run away again. In that instant, my consciousness began to blur. I suddenly remembered Father Rabbit, Grandfather Earth God, Little Flower Demon and Little Flower. Indeed, all things in this world, whether gods or monsters, if they are weak, will be bullied. I was not willing to accept this. In that moment of life and death, I still wanted to fight back. Therefore, I used all my remaining strength to stretch my legs, pulling Lu Wangqing down the mountainside from the forest. Then, we rolled in front of an old man who was chopping wood. It was an old man about 60 years old. Although he was scared, he did not hesitate for a second to use his axe to cut off Lu Wangqing's snake head. But unexpectedly, the severed snake head could fly up, fiercely attacking and biting the old man. In no time, the old man fell to the ground and died. Lu Wangqing's snake head and body crawled around, writhing crazily on the ground to reconnect. I had a feeling that Yuan Ji was about to arrive, so I dragged my dying rabbit body, desperately running back to my three-cave cave. I was seriously injured and was in a coma for several days. When I woke up, Xiao Huayao and Xiaohua told me that General Lu was dead. After his head was cut off, Yuan Ji brought him back to his cave. A snake monster that had cultivated for 1,000 years would only lose its cultivation if its head was cut off, not its life. But I heard that Yuan Ji had swallowed him. A few months later, it rained continuously in Beishan, and dark clouds covered the mountain top. Yuan Ji seemed to have gone crazy, constantly going to the surrounding areas to find food to nourish himself. This movement attracted a Taoist priest wearing green clothes, to come here. Green clothes, green clothes. This Taoist priest was still young, looked very young, and was named Shenxiai Shan. Although young, this Taoist priest was extremely capable. The powerful snake monster Yuan Ji was still captured and put into his bag in the end. After the rain stopped, the mountains and forests seemed to come back to life, the wind was cool and gentle, and the young spring shoots began to sprout. He stood in the pavilion, wiping the sword in his hand, his posture as straight as a pine tree. I hid behind a tree and peeked. After he discovered me, he turned his head to look this way and teased me with a smile, "Little monster, come out." I carefully poked my head out, then "Don't hit me." "Don't worry, I won't hit you." Shen Sishan was the true disciple of Master Shuang of Minshan, Shu. He said that when he passed by this place, he accidentally discovered evil spirits and chased after him here. He loved to laugh, his teeth were white, he looked very handsome, and at a glance I could tell that he was a kind young Taoist. I told him, "You are really amazing, Yuan Ji is the strongest monster in our place. You even caught her." He waved his hand, "My ability is still much weaker than my fellow disciples. It's just that I got lucky this time, it's nothing." I knew he was being modest, so I said with a serious face, "Little master, I am a good monster, always cultivating, never doing evil." Hearing this, he couldn't help but laugh, his eyes curved, "I know. All things have souls, I also wholeheartedly follow the path, only subduing evil monsters." So, one person and one rabbit, we just sat there talking. Until the sun gradually set behind the western mountain, the evening glow covered the entire sky, then Shen Sishan said he had to leave. I was very reluctant to ask him for advice. "Little master, I have been cultivating here for many years, according to you, when will I be able to become an immortal?" "Will I be able to become an immortal?" It seemed that Shen Sishan did not know how to answer. He scratched his head and thought for a moment before saying, "I do not know when you will be able to cultivate to the right fruit. But my master once said, everything in this world has a predetermined fate, as long as we wholeheartedly believe, cut off fate, be sincere, resolve all the grudges that remain in the world, we will surely attain our path." I listened from beginning to end but still did not understand what Shen Sishan said had to do with my becoming an immortal. But I understood the 4 words, resolve grudges. In Beishan, there were no more Lu Wangqing and Yuan Ji, so my grudge was gone. Only this grace remained that I had yet to repay. So half a year later, I closed the cave and went down the mountain. The first time I met Wen Jing was when he was 8 years old. He was a pitiful child, his father and mother had passed away since he was young, and he was raised by his grandfather. The house where the two of them lived was in a village at the foot of the mountain. It was a very old tiled house, the walls were plastered with mud, and there were 3 rooms. The yard was very damp after the rain, and the weeds grew wildly, covered with green moss. The little boy hid behind the door, sticking his head out, his hair disheveled, looking at me both confused and wary. "Who did you say you were?" "I am Lu Xiaoya, your distant cousin, my family is in Jiangling." "Your grandfather's name is Wen Sanqing, you have to call him Grandpa." "But your family doesn't have any relatives in Jiangling?" "Why not?" "You're still young, so your uncle didn't tell you." "Quickly, let me in. I've been on the road for a long time, so I'm thirsty now." I pushed the door open and entered. While the child was still hesitating at the door, I had already entered the yard. "There's only you left in the house. Last year, your grandfather went up the mountain to chop wood and was bitten to death by a snake. Even if I'm really your relative, I came too late and won't be able to meet the adults in the house anymore." I pretended to look surprised, sighed, and patted the child's head. "It's okay, I can meet you." It seemed that the boy didn't get his head patted often, so he turned away in embarrassment. I saw that his face was dirty and a little redder than usual, so I reached out to touch his forehead. Sure enough, his forehead was burning hot. "You have a fever. Have you seen a doctor yet? Have you taken any medicine?" No need to see a doctor, just cover yourself with a blanket and sleep and you'll be fine. He pursed his lips and lowered his head, not looking at me. I looked around the house. The water jar was empty and dry, and there wasn't even a grain of rice in the jar. He looked very short and extremely thin, barefoot, wearing old and thin clothes, with half of the sleeve torn off. Just looking at him, I could imagine how difficult his life was after his grandfather passed away. I suddenly felt a little sad, and said to him, "Then you go lie down on the bed for a while, I'll go to the neighbor's house to borrow some rice to cook." "Don't go." The boy hurriedly pulled my sleeve, hesitated for a moment, then whispered, "Mrs. Chow is a very cruel person. A few days ago, I only picked up a rotten pumpkin from her house, but she stood in the village and cursed me all day long. I didn't steal it. That pumpkin grew on the wall in the backyard, it rotted and fell into my house by itself. When he saw me looking, he thought I misunderstood, so his face turned red, his eyes were slightly red, and his voice choked up. I lowered my head to look at him and smiled. "I know, you should go to bed and rest. I told you, in my bag of clothes there are a few radishes, we can eat radish soup later." Dao village in the west of Bak Sun was a remote and poor village. There were only about 20 households here. The villagers had been farming for generations, relying on a few acres of land and paying land tax to support their families. Normally, a family would have both old people and children, many mouths to feed. When the harvest was good, they could barely meet their needs for food and clothing, but when the harvest was bad, they would starve. Mrs. Chow and her husband lived next door to the Van family, raising 5 children at home, and also a sick mother-in-law. Poor people all have their own dilemmas. They can't even take care of themselves, so where is the kindness to help others? Furthermore, Mrs. Chow was a cunning and stubborn person. She was often seen scolding her husband for being a coward, and sometimes deliberately not giving her mother-in-law food. When Mr. Wen Sanching was alive, he was mute and rarely interacted with the villagers. But he was a gentle and hard-working person. He had a field to cultivate, and when he had free time, he would go into the mountains to cut firewood, carrying firewood 10 miles to sell to the house of the Mandarin, in the town above. Mandarin, an official in ancient times, or referring to a landlord or a gentry, a person of the upper class, in ancient times. Before he passed away, the two of them lived a fairly good life. Xiao Wenjing even studied at a private school in the neighboring village for a year. After he passed away, that field was taken back by the village chief. The damn village chief only gave Xiao Wenjing 3 shings, of rice, saying that he had done his best to help. Tang, 1/10 of a bucket, 1 bucket equals 1 kilogram. Times are tough now, life and death are up to fate, that kind of attitude is normal. So a year after Mr. Van died, his grandson was so hungry that he was left with nothing but skin and bones. Van Ken was still young. He said that he once went down to the foot of the mountain to collect firewood, wanting to carry it up to the town to sell to the Mandarin's house. His shoes were worn out. The Mandarin's house's old steward looked down on his firewood, afraid that there was something wrong with it. After that, he wanted to sell himself to the Mandarin's mansion to be a servant. The steward suddenly laughed, and gave him 2 coins. "The old master's house is not lacking in servants. There are many beggars like you on the main street. Everyone wants to work in the mansion. They can't do anything but still eat a lot. Hurry up and go." When I first came to Van Canna's side, his life was very difficult. From a child who could study in a private school, he was now poor and had to beg for food on the street. That night when I finished cooking the radish soup, the child had a high fever that would not go down. He lay on the bed covered with a stinking blanket, his head covered with sweat, unable to sleep well at all. The child cried in a daze, "I don't want to die, Grandpa, save me, I'm so hungry, I'm so uncomfortable, Grandpa." I pressed my hand against the child's face, then stuffed a small brown pill into his mouth. Not long after, he calmed down. After carefully covering him with the old, smelly blanket, I left the room. That night, Lu Xiaoya, swore under the moon that I would repay Grandpa Wen's kindness to his grandson many times over. I have lived in Dao village for almost half a year. The first thing I did when I arrived was to go to the riverbank to wash my clothes, dry all the household items in the sun, and then clean everything. Then I went up the mountain to pick medicinal herbs, and brought the precious herbs to the town's medical clinic to exchange for money. During the few days that Xiao Wenjing was sick, his body was very weak. He grabbed my sleeve and said to me, "Sister, don't go far. Your brother just went to the middle of the mountain and was bitten by a snake. The villagers nearby all say that there are man-eating wild beasts in the deep mountains. You shouldn't go inside." His voice was a little choked up, and I smiled to reassure him, "Don't worry, I won't go far." Later, when he was able to follow me into the mountains, I led him around almost half the mountain before reaching the secret mountain pass. This place had rolling mountains, clear skies, and clear clouds. Under the bright and beautiful sunlight, the fragrant grass was lush and boundless, and there was also a thatched house built there. The mountain flowers were in full bloom, covering the entrance to the mountain pass. Butterflies were flying everywhere, and a sweet fragrance spread in all directions. Waves of mist drifted around, and the vast smoke and waves were like a thin layer of silk covering the lake, as hazy as a fairyland. Little Wenjing opened his eyes wide, not daring to believe it. How could there be a place like this in the North Mountain? I wouldn't tell him that this was the place where King Huainan ascended 800 years ago. I just patted his head and said, "I accidentally discovered it. This place has a lot of precious herbs, and there are no traces of animals, so it's very safe." Little Wenjing was extremely surprised, and stammered, Then are there any fairies or monsters here?" I laughed out loud, saying that he was so stupid, then pulled him along to pick herbs, and taught him to recognize the different types of herbs. This is the poisonous grass, a poisonous plant. The leaves gather at the top, and can move without wind, also called the heavenly demon. The ginger asterisk plant has leaves that grow in clumps, spread out like a fan, like a normal fan, also called the black fan. Ginger, these herbs can all be sold to the medical clinic in town. If we dry them ourselves, the price will be higher. I will teach you how to identify some edible wild vegetables. For the next 3 months, we went into the mountains all day, picking herbs, picking mushrooms, and digging up wild vegetables. I liked mushrooms and wild vegetables, so I often steamed buns with them. Little Wenjing needed to nourish his body, so I often bought eggs and meat from the town. After cleaning the stove in the house, every day when I finished washing the pots, I would conveniently boil water and use a big brown brush to bathe Wenjing. The child was embarrassed. Every time he bathed, he would clutch his loincloth, his face red, and he refused to take it off. Loincloth, ancient underwear. I am 8 years older than you, and I am your older sister. What is there to be embarrassed about? I scooped water to wash his weak body and kept laughing. Wenjing just blushed and didn't say anything, clutching his loincloth even tighter. After that, we also kept some chicks in the yard, chopping up food for them every day. Wenjing was very smart, and also eager to learn. He had been with me for nearly half a year and was familiar with 7 or 8 types of traditional Chinese medicine. When I wanted to teach him how to steam buns, the little guy lowered his eyes and asked me softly, "When I finish learning all this, will you want to leave?" I was stunned, remembering that I had told him before that although my family was in Jiangling, my father was a wandering doctor and was often not at home. This time, I had come here to look for him, and since my distant relatives were also here, I just wanted to conveniently drop by to visit. Wenjing thought that I wanted to leave. During this period of time, I taught him how to make a living, and went to town to have new clothes made for him. I prepared 2 sets of winter and summer clothes, and 2 pairs of shoes. I understood that his thoughts were quite sensitive and lonely, so I pressed his head down and said with a smile, "Of course not. My family in Jiangling doesn't have any relatives, and my father isn't home. I plan to live here for a long time. I just want to ask for news of him at the nearby medical clinic. The villagers were all familiar with me. Everyone in the village knows that I am a distant cousin of the Wenjing family, whose father is a herbalist. I am a person who understands medicine, and often goes to the mountains to collect medicinal herbs. Ever since I gave medicine to an old man with asthma, sometimes people who run out of money will come to the herbalist to ask for medicine. I have never paid for the medicine, even if they pay me with a bun as thanks, I still accept it. Life is not easy, doing good deeds to help others is also helping yourself. I told Wenjing. He and I, a 16-year-old girl and an 8-year-old boy, lived together in the village, thinking that we were good people, never doing anything to displease anyone. However, one day, after going to the mountains to collect medicinal herbs, we returned to find that the house was in a mess, with signs of a break-in. All the herbs that were drying in the yard were dumped on the ground, and the chickens locked in the coop were nowhere to be seen. I looked at the scattered chicken feathers on the ground and was stunned. Did I accidentally offend a fox without knowing? If he stole a chicken, then just steal it. Why would he knock over my medicinal herbs? Obviously, little Wenjing didn't think that a fox had done this. He clenched his fists, shaking all over, so angry that he burst into tears. He said he knew who did it. The Chow family next door had 5 children, and the family was very poor, not even having enough to eat. In the past, the 2 oldest children in her family had climbed over the wall to this side to steal things. One was called Dinyo, the other was called Nyo. When Mr. Wen was still alive, they had stolen 2 taels of silver from the Wen family. Wenjing said that he had saved up for a long time to have enough 2 taels of silver, originally intending to use it to buy a gift for his brother to enter a private school. When he was not home, he saw Dinyo and Nyo stealing money from his family. They covered his mouth, pushed him down, and pinned him to the ground, beating him up. "Shut your mouth. If you dare tell your grandfather, I will kill both of you." Dinyo's face revealed a fierce and cruel expression. Wenjing was only 6 years old at that time, and was frightened by them, trembling all over. He was so anxious when he saw his grandfather lose money that his face was covered in sweat. He kept making hand gestures at himself. But he didn't dare say anything, he could only sit and cry. The next day, he heard Mrs. Chow laugh at his grandfather. "Your family is so poor, yet you still dream of sending your grandson to a private school? Big Nyo and Nyo are so smart, but they still can't go to school. What's the use of letting that dumb kid Wenjing go to school? It's because your house has money that it was robbed, but like my house, how could anyone break in and steal?" Her mouth kept chattering non-stop. Old Wen was deaf, so he couldn't hear what she said. He just bent his back, kept quiet, and continued to save money. Later, little Wenjing was threatened by Big Nyo and Nyo again, forcing him to tell where his grandfather kept the money. He gritted his teeth and endured, rather than being beaten. Thanks to that, a year later, he was able to go to the private school of the scholar from the next village as he wished. After knowing this, I frowned, a little angry. Wenjing cried and said, "Sister, what should we do? Their family will definitely deny it. If we report it to the village chief but don't have evidence, he won't do anything about it. Don't worry, if they really did it, sister definitely won't let it go." Sure enough, that night the Chow family cooked chicken, and the aroma wafted out. I sat on the roof of her house and saw them sitting inside, devouring the chicken, their mouths glistening. Mrs. Chow clicked her tongue and said, "Tomorrow, take the remaining 2 chickens to the market to sell. Once they're sold, no one will know anything." "So what if you know? Do you have the guts to come and try?" Are you afraid of them? Dainyo snorted. What are you two talking about? This chicken is raised by our family. I saw them grow up with my own eyes every day. I really like them. Nino held the chicken leg in his hand, but his face pretended to be surprised. Mrs. Chow happily clapped her hands, her eyes narrowed like threads of laughter. My two children, each of them is right. In the messy house, 3 heads were buried in the chicken bowl, robbing all the bones of the little girl. The child was still young, and couldn't fight with the adults, so she burst into tears. Mrs. Chow slapped her daughter. Here, you'll steal it. Steal it all day long. You reincarnated hungry ghosts. She glanced at the weak, cowardly man beside her, saw that he was secretly hiding half a chicken leg in his sleeve, then let go of the child, and snatched the piece of meat. Bring it out. What are you hiding? That old lady lies in bed all day, can't do a damn thing. Isn't she afraid of choking to death by eating chicken thighs? The next day, I went to town and paid the coachman 20 coins to rent a donkey. That night, when Chow Dainyo from the house next door went to pee, he picked up a piece of silver scraps at the door. He took a few more steps and picked up another piece. He took a few more steps and found another piece. It was like this until I knocked him out. This guy was still greedily kneeling on the ground looking for silver. Wen Jing and I took the donkey carrying him on its back and went into the mountains. We tied him up with ropes and hung him on a tree in the mountains. Wen Jing was a little scared, holding my hand and trembling. He said it was too dangerous to go into the mountains at night. On the way back, he asked me in a trembling voice, "Sister, if no one finds out, will he starve to death?" For some reason, I heard a little excitement in that trembling voice. I knocked the cup on his head. Of course it is. But our purpose is not to take his life. If no one finds out after 3 days, we will pretend to pass by and save him. I am a demon who has always been devoted to cultivating immortality, and have never thought of taking the life of a human being. I just wanted to make this guy go crazy. Chow Dainyo was only 15 years old. No matter how much he normally acted like a monster, if he was surrounded by dozens of green eyes of wolves staring at him all night long, he would definitely faint. Not only that, my friend Little Flower Demon also kindly transformed into a female ghost hanging on the tree with him. On the 3rd day, Chow Dainyo was found by the villagers. He was indeed crazy. For a long time after that, every day their family cried out to heaven and earth, chickens and dogs barked. I knew it, that Chow family liked to bully others because their daily life was too boring. Now Dainyo was crazy. All day long he cried out that he was being captured by a ghost. Nyo was also scared, living a much more obedient life. Indeed, if you raise your head 3 feet, there is a spirit. Don't think that doing evil deeds won't be known. They have no moral limits, no fear of rules. Only ghosts and gods can teach these people. If a person does evil, disaster will definitely come. So don't do evil and bully others. I said to Wen Jing. Little Wen Jing also understood. He looked at me and said, "Sister, I'm the one being bullied." Of course I knew he was weak, very easy to bully. He was a pitiful child. After dealing with the Chow family's affairs, I went to the old scholar's house in the neighboring village, and gave Wen Jing a gift for his admission to continue studying. Before, I asked him if he wanted to study medicine to gain the ability to make a living, or if he wanted to study to become an official in the future. Wen Jing chose to study. He said that he would become a high-ranking official in the future, and beat the evil people in the village hard with a stick, so that in the future, children like him would have a way to live, and would not be bullied by bad people anymore. I praised him. Good ambition. He immediately stood up straight and asked me, "Sister, what is your ambition?" He opened his eyes wide, looking at me seriously. He probably thought I would say something like curing illnesses and saving people. I smiled at him, acting mysterious. "I'm only telling you this, don't tell anyone, understand? I'll become a god in the future." Little Wenjing's eyes opened even wider after hearing this, then he also smiled, saying the same thing as me, good ambition. From then on, Wenjing began his path of study. Every day, at Mao hour, he would start leaving home, carrying his backpack, carrying the lunch I had prepared, to the private school in the neighboring village. Mao hour, 5 to 7 a.m. In the evening when the sun set, at the right time I would see that small figure covered in the warm sunset appear at the village gate. The first few days, every day he came back, he was extremely happy. But the happy days were short-lived, and I don't know when, but when he returned home, he often had injuries and bruises on his face. I asked him what happened, and he hesitated, saying that he had fallen. It was only when I pretended to be angry that he cried and told me that there were some children at school who bullied him because he was gentle. The scholar was a very old man, with dim eyes and deaf ears. Wenjing had once told him that he had used a ruler to beat those children, but afterwards they took revenge on Wenjing even more fiercely. He couldn't beat those children, so he had to endure and didn't dare to fight back. I told him, in this world, there are some bad people who were created just because the weak pampered them. Once they have an elephant, they will continue to ask for more. If you don't fight back, you will be bullied forever. Because he listened to me, the number of times Wenjing was injured when he returned home increased. I feel sorry for the boy. When he got home and saw me, he burst into tears and cried, saying, "Sister, I lost the fight again." I applied the medicine and encouraged him, "We are weak, so there is nothing to be afraid of, just keep fighting them." He immediately straightened his back, stopped crying and said, "I will continue to fight." Just fighting is not enough, you have to have a plan. For example, when fighting them, don't fight them all at once, just target one of them, beat that one up until he is completely dead. Next time, that person definitely won't dare to touch you again. Wenjing was a child who cried a lot. He looked very elegant, with sparkling single eyelids, fair skin, and when he cried, his nose was pink. Every time he called, "Sister," I felt like a little girl. I couldn't bear to let him be bullied, so I made a puppet in the yard, taught him a few moves, and practiced over and over again. Every morning I took him for a few laps around the foot of the mountain. Summer passed, winter came, and time passed like that. I don't know when Wenjing stopped getting beaten up. At school, he even made friends with a few people. Among them was a person named Li Yuanbao, the leader of the group of bullies who had bullied him before. Wenjing generously said, "Sister, if we don't fight, we won't know each other." Brother Yuanbao and I have long since put aside our previous grudges. If we don't fight, we won't know each other / befriend each other. It turned out that in the blink of an eye, 5 years had passed. Since the male lead had already had his coming-of-age ceremony, from now on, I'll call him him. Wenjing had turned 13. After his coming-of-age ceremony, he went to the library of the bachelor in town to study. Because he was very intelligent, he even got first place in the county exam that year, so Wenjing caught the eye of Bachelor Qing. He was determined to personally train and teach him to become talented. He could have moved into the library, but he didn't. Every evening, he didn't mind the trouble of hitchhiking to get home. Van Ken had changed a lot at the age of 13. He was now almost as tall as me. He wore a white silk robe made of smooth fabric, with a round collar, wide sleeves, a horizontal seam underneath, and regular folds around the waist, giving him the dignified appearance and elegant gestures of a scholar. Lan Sam, a robe with a diagonal collar worn on the outside, with a seam across the knee called Hong Lan, often worn by officials and students in the Song dynasty. The image is below the comments section. His eyebrows were long and thin, his eyelashes were as black as ink, his personality was now much more stable than before, his voice had also changed, becoming lower. However, his habit of crying was still the same as before. At that time, he was a Dongxing *, and I had lived in the village for 5 years, so I was bored. Dongxing, young student, during the Ming and Qing dynasties, used to refer to students who had not yet taken the bachelor's exam or had not yet passed the bachelor's exam. The image of the examination system at that time was below the comments section. I thought he might be staying at the library, so I used the excuse that I had heard news of my father and wanted to go look for him. I told Wen Jing that I would be back in less than half a year. However, after returning to my cave, I forgot all about him. After Lu Wangqing and Yuan Ji were gone, Beishan became an extremely comfortable place, where all things flourished, and the sky and earth brightened. Xia Weiweio's winemaking skills became better and better. She happily ran around me, boasting that the wine she brewed now could make me as happy as a god. I didn't believe it, so I drank a whole jar. After that, I saw countless monsters circling around me. The moon hung high in the air like a jade tray, toads stood in chorus, crickets sat to one side chirping, and mouse monsters wore human skirts, happily dancing. Xiaohui transformed into a human, with branches still stuck to her head, cheering and dancing in front of me. Little you, sister, I've transformed. Look, I have arms and legs like a human. Everyone gathered together happily all day long, and the fox demon also came to ask for wine. The day before, they were happy for me to return to the cave, and the next day, they were congratulating Xiaohua on his successful transformation. When the little flower demon bloomed, it also celebrated, and the mouse nest in the shrine of the land god gave birth to 8 baby mice, and they also celebrated. In addition, each reason had its own celebration party. A year passed like this. I was so happy that I forgot everything, drank, and got drunk beside them. One day, I suddenly woke up and remembered Wen Jing. After that, I hurried down the mountain to look for him. When I got to the village, I realized that he had not been to the library for a while. He was sick, and his body was now as weak as when we first met. He was very sick, his whole body was emaciated, his face was pale, his eyes were dark, and he was sad and lifeless. I was extremely frightened. After seeing me, he smiled, and after he finished smiling, he put his head on my knee and cried. His tears soaked my skirt. He said between sobs, "Sister, I went everywhere but could not find you. I was so scared that you wouldn't come back, and scared that something bad would happen to you and you wouldn't be able to come back. Sister, you're so cruel, you didn't even bother to send me a letter. You scared me to death. I was the one who was about to die. Because of Mr. Van's kindness, I came here to take care of him. If he dies because of me, wouldn't I have committed another sin?" When the little flower demon bloomed, it also celebrated, and the mouse nest in the shrine of the land god gave birth to 8 baby mice, and they also celebrated. In addition, each reason had its own celebration party. A year passed like this. I was so happy that I forgot everything, drank, and got drunk beside them. One day, I suddenly woke up and remembered Wen Jing. After that, I hurried down the mountain to look for him. When I got to the village, I realized that he had not been to the library for a while. He was sick, and his body was now as weak as when we first met. He was very sick, his whole body was emaciated, his face was pale, his eyes were dark, and he was sad and lifeless. I was extremely frightened. After seeing me, he smiled, and after he finished smiling, he put his head on my knee and cried. His tears soaked my skirt. He said between sobs, "Sister, I went everywhere but could not find you. I was so scared that you wouldn't come back, and scared that something bad would happen to you and you wouldn't be able to come back. Sister, you're so cruel, you didn't even bother to send me a letter. You scared me to death. I was the one who was about to die. Because I received Mr. Van's kindness, I came here to take care of him. If he dies because of me, wouldn't I have committed another sin?" I felt so guilty, so I promised him, "I'm sorry. This will never happen again. I promise you." I coaxed him for a long time before he raised his head to look at me. his eyes still red. The young man's face seemed to be covered in a layer of pink powder. His jet-black pupils now shimmered with tears, as if blending with the surrounding pink. Looking at him, one's heart felt like it was about to break. Sister, no matter where you go in the future, can you take me with you? Without you, I won't be able to live for long. Wenjing's expression was extremely serious. At that time, I only thought that he was still a child, so I didn't take those words seriously. It wasn't until he killed someone for me that I suddenly realized that the weak and pitiful child from before was becoming more and more distant. When he was only 16 years old, when Jing topped the imperial examination, his reputation spread far and wide, becoming a famous scholar everywhere. At that time, he was already a scholar asterisk, and was given 950 coins by the government every month. The student who passed the imperial examination achieved good results, and was given a salary by the imperial court to study until he became famous. I was idle and had nothing to do, so I often went to the mountains to pick herbs like before. When Wenjing had nothing to do, he also went to the mountains to pick herbs with me. Now he no longer needed to go to Qingjuren to listen to lectures, he only needed to stay at home to read books, preparing for the imperial examination in the capital 3 years later. I stayed at home to grind herbs, and he stayed in the room to read books. Every now and then, he would come out to help me grind herbs, or chop wood and carry water. When Wenjing grew up, he was taller than me, dressed neatly, and had the appearance of a Qilon Ngoc Thursday asterisk. Asterisk, orchid and jade tree, figuratively, a child with bright prospects and a bright future. Although he had the appearance of a weak scholar, he was actually very strong, and could chop wood with just a hammer. When he went to school in the library, he even learned how to use a sword. Because he had written so much, his hands that had held a pen for so long had thick calluses. At home, the 16-year-old scholar not only had to chop wood and carry water, but also had to be busy washing clothes every day. As for washing clothes, this was something he insisted on doing. Before he was 12, I had washed all the clothes in the house. One morning, he grabbed the loincloth he had changed out of, blushing, and refused to give it to me no matter what. I was wondering if he was sick, but he took all the clothes from my hand, saying that you were tired all day, from now on, let him wash the clothes in the house. In my eyes, washing clothes is no different from chopping firewood, it is all housework, everyone does it the same. I never realized that there was anything wrong here, nor did I realize that the fact that I used this brown brush to scrub Wenjing's back every day, now 16 years old, was anything unusual. He was no longer the shy 8-year-old child. In front of me, he still wore a loincloth, I had to sit down before I could pour water to scrub his shoulders and back. He was not embarrassed at all, every time he bathed he would calmly chat with me. Sister, where did you get this brown brush? Bought it at the market in town. Actually, this is used to wash horses, when I was in your residence, I saw it, the servants used it to wash horses. Huh? Really? No wonder it's still durable after so many years of use. Sister, but it rubs on your body really hard, it hurts a lot. Why didn't you say so earlier? Just let it rub on you for so many years. It's okay, I can take it. Ha! 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 This kid Van Can, are you stupid? I couldn't help but laugh at him, and put down the toothbrush in my hand, not rubbing him hard anymore. He suddenly turned around, raised his head to look at me, his upper body was bare, soaked, and white bubbles were splashing out, floating gently. The young man's lively face looked very gentle at first glance, he curved his lips and smiled at me, his eyes were jet black, his expression serious. Sister, I'm not a kid anymore, Liang Guanbao, who is the same age as me, is about to get married. Besides, I'm not an idiot, because that person is you, no matter how much pain I have, I can take it. He just silently looked at me like that, sitting still for a long time. I don't know why, but when I looked into those bright eyes, my heart started beating very fast. I didn't understand why my heart was beating fast, nor did I understand what that fast heartbeat meant. I only vaguely realized that Wen Jing had become a bit distant. I began to feel that his personality was not only colder but also extremely sensitive. A few days later, we went to the government office to receive his salary. At the market, Wen Jing bought paper and ink, and also insisted on stopping by the jewelry store to choose a jade hairpin for me. After that, we met Qingru Lan, the daughter of his teacher. Everyone knew that graduate Qing had 2 daughters. The older daughter married into the capital and became the wife of an official. The younger daughter was Qingru Lan, both talented and beautiful, knowledgeable and well-mannered, a talented woman recognized by the entire district. She was 2 years older than Wen Jing, and coincidentally, she was also choosing jewelry in the store with the maid. When she saw Wen Jing, her eyes lit up. As she called his name, she greeted me softly, "Sister." This wasn't the first time I had seen her. The year before, when Wen Jing took the imperial examination, she was in the carriage outside the government office. Although she didn't get off, she still lifted the curtain and spoke to us a few sentences. At that time, she said to Wen Jing, "Yesterday, I followed my mother to the temple to burn incense and wrote a lucky charm for you. On the charm was written, 'The name is written on the tower for joy, a swallow is a flower, it is good to return to the east, the high locust tree is half yellow.' This time, a Jing will definitely be at the top of the list of gold. If anyone has a translation of this poem, please let us know." As soon as she finished speaking, she folded the small amulet and gave it to Wen Jing. Qingru Lan smiled and spoke gently as she looked at Wen Jing, but he still bowed seriously, not intending to reach out to receive it. Wen Jing said, "Thank you for your kindness, second miss, but to avoid causing misunderstandings with the supervisor in the government office, I should not bring anything in." Qingru Lan was startled, quickly put the amulet away, and only smiled. Jing is right, I didn't think it through." Her smile faded a lot, and even I could see her sadness. After she left, I curiously asked Wen Jing, "Pens, inkstones, and toiletries are allowed, so why not bring such a small amulet?" Wen Jing raised his eyebrows and looked at me, smiling, "I don't want to bring it." "Why?" "Because I don't need it." At that time, I just told him that he was conceited and carefree, not realizing the other meaning of that amulet. In the jewelry store, Qingru Lan stood gracefully in front of us, hesitantly asking Wen Jing, "A few days ago, your mansion asterisk had a banquet, why didn't you come?" Asterisk, hometown, home, respectful way of speaking. Wen Jing showed respect, his words urgent. "Master held a banquet to entertain the officials of the government office. I heard that there were also eunuchs from the capital coming. I am just a small scholar, young and inexperienced. Not many people know me. How could I dare to come to such a noble banquet? You are the top candidate of the imperial examination, what is there to not dare to do? Moreover, I even deliberately asked my father to let you come. That day, I had a stomachache and was sick, so I had no choice but to decline your good intentions." "Wen Jing, you really treat me." Surrounded by the crowd, Qingru Lan suddenly had tears in her eyes, choked up and fell silent, then suddenly spoke, "All right, I will participate in the imperial court ladies selection. I should have left last year. You are heartless. No matter how many other things I do, it will be useless." I could only stand there and watch the light in Qingru Lan's eyes fade little by little and then go out completely, unable to do anything. So I couldn't help but turn to evaluate Wen Jing. His figure was tall, his face was like jade, his expression was indifferent, his eyes under his long eyelashes were cold, he looked extremely calm. In half a month, this young man would be 17. It turned out that in the past few years, he had changed so much. His appearance was dignified, his face was handsome, he was also a famous talent everywhere, so he was favored by beauties. I felt an indescribable joy in my heart, feeling that my efforts over the past few years had not been in vain. and that I had not disappointed Mr. Van, right? But at the same time, I also felt a little confused, so he had grown up? Li Yuanbao, who was the same age as him, was about to get married. On the way back, we didn't hitchhike. When we reached the mountain road, Wen Jing held my hand, laughing and talking. At this moment, it was like going back to the time when he was 8 years old. Back then, on the way to pick herbs, I would hold his hand, we would laugh and talk to each other. We just walked hand in hand comfortably, naturally, like flowing water wears away rocks, winter passes and spring comes, all things grow. Now he's grown up, his hand is much bigger than mine. His warm and big hand completely covered my small hand. "What are you thinking about?" He saw that I was distracted, so he was unhappy, and clenched his hand. I frowned slightly, and said out loud the question in my heart, "Li Yuanbao is about to get married soon, why didn't you agree to go with Miss Qing?" Because she's 2 years older than you?" When Wen Jing heard this, he was a little stunned, then he laughed out loud, "It has nothing to do with age." "Then why?" Although Lord Qing has very high standards for choosing a son-in-law and intends to send his daughter to the capital, you are his most favorite student, right? You are young and talented, and your education is also good. If you were to ask for his hand in marriage, he might consider it. You think too highly of me. I have no achievements yet, how can I be worthy of the young lady of the Qing family? Moreover, I don't like her. Qing Rulan is not only beautiful but also talented. I don't understand why Wen Jing doesn't like her. So I asked him, "Do you want to wait until you achieve achievements before marrying a noble lady?" I thought to myself, if he really has this intention, I should have to go back to my cave. There are some treasures in my cave, it should be enough of a dowry for him to marry a princess. While I was silently calculating in my heart, Wen Jing said, "That's not it, sister. You're older than me, but you don't understand anything about love between men and women." Of course I wouldn't understand. I'm a monster, how could I understand if I were a human? Not only love between men and women, I also couldn't understand the feelings between General Lu and Yuan Ji. I, a rabbit who has always diligently cultivated to become an immortal, still couldn't understand, why did Yuan Ji have to give up the opportunity to become an immortal for General Lu? Cultivating immortality is the greatest dream of all monsters, right? Can't she become an immortal alone? I admit that General Lu is a very handsome male snake, and the feelings between the two of them are very deep, but so what? All things in this world have their own souls and intelligence, no matter how deep they are, in the end they will have to part ways. She should have understood that becoming an immortal is a tribulation. Even Yuan Ji is a monster and I don't understand it, so how can I understand the love between a man and a woman that Wen Jing talked about? However, Wen Jing understood very clearly. He looked at me and said, "Sister, I don't have any other wishes. In this life, I only want to marry the person I like. No matter how old she is or what her status is, I don't care. If you like someone, just tell me. I will definitely help you marry her." I was very confident. My cave was full of rare treasures, right? You really love me. Wen Jing laughed. Remember these words, don't change your mind when the time comes. The two of us walked straight home. As soon as we pushed the door open, Wen Jing took a step forward, his eyes glanced around the yard, then his gaze darkened, his expression clearly changed. I was still wondering what was going on in the house when he quickly walked into the house, then turned back. "A thief broke into the house," he said with a gloomy expression. I frowned, looking around but still couldn't find anything missing. "What's missing?" "Bikini." His voice suddenly lowered, he pursed his lips, his expression was a bit strange. "Huh?" I originally had 3 bibs, one pink with a rose pattern, one lotus leaf pattern embroidered with flowers, the other one embroidered with a phoenix holding a peony in its mouth with gold thread. This morning, I washed the bib embroidered with a phoenix holding a peony. It was originally hung on the clothesline, but now it's nowhere to be found. Just now, I looked inside and out, and only found that bib missing. I angrily said, "Where did the thief get it? They even stole clothes, how disgusting." Wen Jing pursed his lips, his face dark as he looked in one direction, which was the direction of the Chao family's house. I immediately understood that the thief was Chao Niu. It turned out that Chao Niu had been insane for 8 years. At first, I planned to make Chao Niu go crazy first. If later on they knew their place and stopped bullying people, I would cure him. However, they still did not know what was good for them. That old woman Chao was still as vicious as before, the most despicable person in the family. She could not stand seeing others living well. Chao Niu was also obedient for the first few years, but then she started stealing again. The Chao family had 3 daughters, 2 of whom were already married, leaving only the youngest, named Gui Hua, who stayed home all day doing laundry, cooking, and following orders from Mrs. Chao. Gui Hua was 4 years younger than Wen Jing. I used to feel sorry for her, and once, when Mrs. Chao was not home, I gave her 2 freshly steamed buns. Who would have thought that at night Mrs. Chao and Chao Niu would carry her to my house, crying and wailing in front of the gate. Mrs. Chao said that Gui Hua ate my 2 buns and then rolled her eyes and lay there motionless. She must have been poisoned. Then she made me pay 5 taels of silver. I was extremely horrified by her shamelessness. On this side, I was still about to say that Wen Jing and I had eaten that bun, but nothing happened, when Wen Jing on the other side smiled coldly and walked towards Gui Hua with a knife in his hand, then squatted in front of her. Old woman Chao shouted loudly, "What are you going to do?" He said, "She has already rolled her eyes, so she definitely cannot be saved. If that's the case, then why don't you cut open her stomach, then dig out her intestines to find those 2 buns, and check to see if they are poisonous or not." Before he finished speaking, he lowered his knife. Gui Hua was frightened. She jumped up and ran away in a fume. Oh my! The villagers around saw this and laughed loudly. The village chief scolded old woman Chao, forcing her to pay 2 taels of silver. Half of the silver was paid to Wen Jing and me, because he was now a fellow student in the county, and had caught the eye of Master Ching. The other half was used to pay for the travel expenses in the village. That's right, he didn't mind the hardship and hired someone to carry him from the east end of the village to the west end. Mrs. Chao cried and said she didn't have any money, complaining that demanding 2 taels of silver was no different from taking her life. The village chief sneered when he heard that, "Then use the harvest from your field to pay." After hearing that, she cried even louder. After that farce ended, everyone dispersed and returned home. Wen Jing looked at me and smiled, then seriously said, "Sister, helping people accumulate virtue is a very good thing, but on the condition that they are good people. That girl was raised by Mrs. Chao since she was little, and the rain soaked the ground. Do you think she could be good?" I had to admit that what Wen Jing said was very true. Now, he suspected that Chao Niu stole my shirt for a reason. In recent years, Wen Jing has grown up and learned swordsmanship, so Chao Niu has long since stopped daring to climb over here to steal things. However, the relationship between us and Mrs. Chao has never been good. Last year, after Wen Jing passed the imperial examination, Mrs. Chao, who had always been jealous of us, suddenly changed her attitude and brought a matchmaker to the door. She smiled and said that I had come to the village at the age of 16, and had worked hard to raise Wen Jing. Now that he had passed the imperial examination, it could be considered as suffering after suffering, and happiness after suffering. As for me, I was already 24, and the important matter of my life had been delayed, and now I had become a spinster. After suffering and misfortune, there would come a time of happiness and joy. Mrs. Chao's Niu just happened to not have a wife yet, and was 3 years younger than me. She was both intelligent and hardworking. Ningu liked me, said she didn't care about my age, and was willing to marry me. She had observed me for several years and saw that I was also diligent, hardworking, intelligent, and talented. Her mouth kept chattering nonstop, each sentence implying, Ningu's liking a spinster like me was a blessing from 8 lifetimes. After hearing that, Vankin sneered, went straight into the room, took out his sword, and said, "Who are you? What kind of toad did you crawl out of? Whether my sister gets married or not, it's your turn to sit here and talk nonsense? That rat is despicable. How can you be human without etiquette? If etiquette doesn't exist in life, why not die? What's the point of living like a vicious woman like you? Today, I'll cut off your tongue and feed it to the dogs." Vankin finished speaking, drew his sword, and walked straight toward her. She screamed in fear, then ran out of my house in panic with the matchmaker. They dared to say that I was a spinster, an unmarried spinster. I was not convinced. Even monsters loved beauty. Although Lu Xiaoya was not as beautiful as a swallow, she was considered a beautiful woman. How could she be a spinster? Body like a swallow, graceful figure, shy as a willow. Red cheeks and pink lips. Before that, there were many matchmakers who often came here to arrange a match for me. From the rich Li Taishu in the village to the nephew of the owner of the medical clinic in town, everyone wanted to marry me. But I went down the mountain to repay a favor, not to get married, so I refused them all. Gradually, the people who came to propose to me became fewer and fewer. I thought everyone knew that I did not want to marry, but it turned out that they thought I was too old and stopped coming. Now, he suspected that Chao Niu stole my shirt for a reason. In recent years, when Jing has grown up and learned swordsmanship, so Chao Niu has long since stopped daring to climb over here to steal things. However, the relationship between us and Mrs. Chao has never been good. Last year, after Wen Jing passed the imperial examination, Mrs. Chao, who had always been jealous of us, suddenly changed her attitude and brought a matchmaker to the door. She smiled and said that I had come to the village at the age of 16, and had worked hard to raise Wen Jing. Now that he had passed the imperial examination, it could be considered as suffering after suffering, and happiness after suffering. As for me, I was already 24, and the important matter of my life had been delayed, and now I had become a spinster. After suffering and misfortune, there would come a time of happiness and joy. Mrs. Chao's Niu just happened to not have a wife yet, and was 3 years younger than me. She was both intelligent and hardworking. Ningu liked me, said she didn't care about my age, and was willing to marry me. She had observed me for several years and saw that I was also diligent, hardworking, intelligent, and talented. Her mouth kept chattering nonstop, each sentence implying, Ningu's liking a spinster like me was a blessing from 8 lifetimes. After hearing that, Vankin sneered, went straight into the room, took out his sword, and said, "Who are you? What kind of toad did you crawl out of? Whether my sister gets married or not, it's your turn to sit here and talk nonsense? That rat is despicable. How can you be human without etiquette? If etiquette doesn't exist in life, why not die? What's the point of living like a vicious woman like you? Today, I'll cut off your tongue and feed it to the dogs." Vankin finished speaking, drew his sword, and walked straight toward her. She screamed in fear, then ran out of my house in panic with the matchmaker. They dared to say that I was a spinster, an unmarried spinster. I was not convinced. Even monsters loved beauty. Although Lu Xiaoya was not as beautiful as a swallow, she was considered a beautiful woman. How could she be a spinster? Body like a swallow, graceful figure, shy as a willow. Red cheeks and pink lips. Before that, there were many matchmakers who often came here to arrange a match for me. From the rich Li Taishu in the village to the nephew of the owner of the medical clinic in town, everyone wanted to marry me. But I went down the mountain to repay a favor, not to get married, so I refused them all. Gradually, the people who came to propose to me became fewer and fewer. I thought everyone knew that I did not want to marry, but it turned out that they thought I was too old and stopped coming. Ciao. Nyo was very strong, but I wasn't the type of person who was as gentle as a Buddha, so I gave him a kick. A kick straight to his crotch. I laughed and asked him, "Does it hurt?" He hugged himself and writhed on the ground, his face white with pain, panting and cursing, "You bitch. What the hell are you pretending to be pure and virtuous for? A shameless woman like you, I'm already lucky enough to like you. You say I don't know how to keep my dignity?" I looked at him in confusion. Where? Tell me? The dirty things between you and Wenjing can be hidden from others, but not from me and my mother. A man and a woman living together in the same house, and you still haven't married anyone. You two must have had an affair, right? You adulterous couple, calling each other sister and brother on the surface, but secretly having an affair behind each other's backs. You two are the kind of shameless men and shameless women. I was so stunned by his scolding that I was stunned for a long time before I could react, angrily saying, "Wenjing and I are as close as real brothers, our relationship is pure. How dare you use such foul language to curse me? I saw you coming out of his bathroom with my own eyes." The bib hanging on the clothesline was also washed and hung out to dry in the sun by him. A scholar who reads sages like that, if he hadn't been seduced by you, why would he wash bibs for women? So what if he washes bibs? He not only washes bibs, but also washes all of our clothes. Sometimes I also chop wood and carry water. Why can't he wash them? You two fucking men and women are so angry that you're embarrassed. Thanks to my mother telling me, I found out about this kind of dark relationship between you two. Ciao. Nyo's expression was fierce. He stood up and said, "Lu Xiaoya, I don't care about these trivial matters between you and her. As long as you follow me and cut off all ties with that guy, my mother and I will live and die with this in our hearts." You watched Van Can grow up day by day. He worked so hard to pass the imperial examination, step by step to get to where he is today. Later he still has to go to the capital to take the imperial examination. Surely you don't want his reputation to be damaged, his career path to be ruined, right? I frowned at him, his steps staggering towards me. In the blink of an eye, his body was pierced by the sword. Ciao. Nyo stared in disbelief, turning his head to see Wenjing standing behind him, his face cold as ice, emotionless. He had just finished bathing, wearing a loincloth and an outer coat, his clothes loose, still dripping with water running down his bare chest. Wenjing was tall and thin, his braided hair was now soaked and a bit messy. He just coldly and calmly killed Ciao. Nyo, his face not showing any confusion. It was not until I called out to him, "Wenjing?" It seemed that only then did he regain his senses, his eyes glistening with tears slightly red. Sister, I killed someone." Wenjing, at the age of 17, put down the blood-stained sword in his hand, not even bothering to look at the ground once, just calmly looked at me and walked over. Now he was a head taller than me, his towering figure slowly embracing me. He buried his head in the hollow of my neck, his warm breath mixed with wet tears. "Sister, don't be afraid, from now on, I will protect you." Wenjing and I handled the body together. The third day after Mrs. Ciao discovered her son missing, she reported it to the authorities. She said that Wenjing and I definitely knew Nyo's whereabouts because he had come to our house the night he went missing. I asked her, what did he come to our house for? She suddenly fell silent, but very quickly said fiercely, "He must have come to find you. It must have been you who seduced my son, wanting to have an affair with him." I looked at her in surprise, and Wenjing's face immediately darkened. At the county office, he only sneered and said, "The rules of the government office are clear and high. Should the judgment be left to a mean woman like you here to bite the dust? Clear and high, a bright mirror hangs high, showing the wisdom of a judge, the top scholar in the imperial examination, with a sharp tongue and terrifying aura, turned the situation around and pushed Mrs. Chow into the crime of slander. The magistrate of course sided with him, saying that Chow Nyo was a cunning person who wandered around all day, and might have gone astray somewhere else. As for Mrs. Chow dared to slander the top scholar in the imperial examination, it was truly an infuriating thing, so she was punished with 20 lashes as a warning. This case ended just like that. After Chow Nyo died, my mood was depressed for a long time. The reason was of course because of what he said before he died. Mrs. Chow's mouth was very talkative. I knew I couldn't forgive her, so at night I transformed into my dead mother-in-law and went to look for her. That old lady died skinny and bony, and was tormented endlessly by her. Sure enough, that Mrs. Chow went crazy later on. I looked at the Chow family's house across the wall, where the cowardly man and his 14-year-old daughter Gui Hua had to look after the two crazy people, Chow Dinyo and Mrs. Chow, busying themselves with forgetting the past. The place where they lived was finally completely quiet. At the same time, during that time, the situation between Van Can and I also quietly changed. When I went up the mountain to pick herbs, I would no longer hold his hand. I also didn't scrub his back with the big brown brush while he was bathing. I would wash his clothes and bib myself, absolutely not letting him touch them. After living in human society for nearly 10 years, I finally learned a word: avoid suspicion. When Jing also noticed this change, his expression was generally quite calm, not saying a word. Only now did I belatedly realize that Chow Nyo was right. When Jing was a person who read the books of the sages, he should have known long ago that these actions were not in accordance with the rules. But he never said anything. I hated that he didn't say a word about this. That year, he was already 17 years old. I finally realized that when Jing had now become a profound person, no longer the little boy I was familiar with in the past. I lived under the same roof with him, safe and sound. From then on I didn't cross the line again. Until he went to the capital to take the imperial examinations. I returned to the cave and happily gathered with the little monsters all day long. They loved to hear me tell stories about the old days at the foot of the mountain, about the town, and about the diverse people. I sighed and said, being human is not enjoyable at all. The people at the foot of the mountain are very poor, working all year round just to fill their stomachs, then giving birth to children. Moreover, there are extremely many human rules, especially those for women, imprisoning their bodies, and also stupidizing their minds. Things like etiquette, female rules, chastity, weakness, are passed down from generation to generation. Must you obey these things? Xiaohua stroked each branch above his head, curiously asking me. That's right, the funniest thing is that the ones who demand you to obey these things are mostly women. The ones who like to make up stories and slander women are also other women. Can't you resist? Resist? Unless your deluded and confused minds wake up, then maybe. I looked at the moon above, and said sadly, this is very difficult. Sister little you are a demon, why should you endure their restrictions? You still have to follow the local customs. If you go against traditional customs, you won't be able to survive. I gloomily drank a sip of the wine brewed by Little Flower Demon, while the Fox Demon beside me was extremely calm, wearing a cloak, and said to me meaningfully, a person who goes against morality will definitely not be able to survive. Only when everyone opposes it together can it become the right path. I agreed with what she said, raising my thumb and praising, good. Hu Yao turned her head away arrogantly. Xiao Huayao asked me again, your benefactor's young master, did he pass the imperial examination this time? I don't know, but he must have ranked 3rd or higher. His education is extremely good. I heard that the talented person whose name is on the imperial examination list will be matched with someone from the capital, and when the results are announced, he will be put straight into a sack to go to the wedding ceremony. That's called catching a son-in-law under the list. Hu Yao on the side squinted and opened his mouth to speak. In short, we will cover the marriage, the young master will ascend to the clouds in one step, and Xiao Yu, you can successfully retreat. Xiao Hua Yao said happily. Not necessarily, there is a saying that too much joy turns to sadness. Hu Yao said. Okay. Mr. Hu, you quickly spit it out. I swallowed it, I can't vomit it out. If I can't vomit it out, let Xiao He stir the branch in your mouth a few times. Try it. A gathering of demons, extremely lively. I carelessly ignored what the fox demon said, because I thought that my Lu Xiaoya's fate would not be so unlucky. I lay on the fork of a tree, drank a whole jar of wine, and looked at the moon in the distance. It was round like a white jade tray, with the shadow of a crow flying by, and in the distance I could even see a cinnamon tree. It looked lonely, but it had always been my dream. One day I would stand there, watching Fairy Yu dance gently, becoming friends with the jade rabbit pounding medicine. I was extremely looking forward to that day, and gradually my head became a little dizzy, and I saw the toads under the tree singing, and the rat spirits dancing. I smiled foolishly, and said to Xiaohuai, when they cursed at people, they called them toads, saying that rats still had skin. Who would have thought that being a toad and a rat would be much happier than being a human? Van Can stayed in the capital for half a year. When he left, he told me, Sister, you have to wait for me to come back. If I don't see you when I come back, I will be heartbroken to death. I don't know why, but he was always worried that I would leave. When he was 14, after I returned from the mountain, I lied to him that I had found my father, that he was wandering around the world, and told me not to miss him. I also promised him that I wouldn't leave quietly. I also witnessed this young man gradually becoming more calm, with a cold, clear temperament. It was still the same single eyelids, with long, thin eyelashes cleverly covering those beautiful phoenix eyes. When he smiled, the corners of his mouth lifted slightly, creating a beautiful curve. Sister, I'm back. I thought I should have listened to Little Flower Demon's words earlier, and told Little Flower Demon to stir Fox Demon's mouth with a branch. His mouth was truly unlucky. After returning, Wen Jing brought me 2 pieces of news. First, he did not become an official in the capital but was transferred to the north, to be the county magistrate of Qingqi County. Second, he wanted to marry me. I could not believe my ears. Even though he did not pass the 3rd class, he was still the 6th-ranked doctor in the list, a pretty high position, but why did he end up in that small place, to be the county magistrate there? I did not believe it, he must be hiding something from me. But before I could ask clearly, Wen Jing said he wanted to marry me. When I heard this news, I was so scared that I froze. I stood up. I'm your older sister. We're just distant relatives. He said calmly. I'm 8 years older than you. I'm 27. I've said it before, I just want to marry the person I like. No matter how old she is, or what her status is, I don't care. When Jing stepped forward, held my hand, his face extremely serious, you also said that no matter who you like, you will definitely help me marry that person, right? You're crazy, I kept muttering and then sat down on the chair. I watched you grow up every day, treating you like a relative. Everyone in the village knows about our relationship. And now you say you want to marry me? Your life is so peaceful that you can't stand it, so you want to rush to your death. Wen Jing, we are close sisters, you can't have this kind of thinking. If you don't follow the rules, the world's tongues will drown you. What are you afraid of? We're not blood-related sisters, where are the rules to follow? I like you, I want to marry you, why should I care what people say? This is between the 2 of us? Every word Wen Jing said was extremely earnest. He slowly squatted down, held my hand and said, you don't need to worry about anything, and you don't need to care about anyone else. We'll go to Jizhou. After we leave here, no one will know about us. Those words were like an explosion in my head, making me suddenly awake, suddenly realizing how perceptive Wenjing was. He knew I would be worried, so he had prepared everything in advance. That's why he said these words to me now. I suddenly felt cold. Those who passed the imperial examination whose names were on the golden list should have been kept in the capital. Why were you pushed away? You offended someone. He looked at me and smiled lightly, still calm as usual. Offended who? Of course it was the nobles in the capital. Why did you offend them? Do you really have to ask about this? He put on a helpless expression, his eyes becoming gentler and gentler. Of course it's for you, for me. I thought I probably understood his general meaning. Now I only felt extremely upset. My heart was in turmoil. I coldly said, Wenjing, I can't marry you. You don't need to think about that anymore. I don't have any romantic feelings for you. Now that you're a doctor, I plan to leave here. I won't go with you. Sister. He suddenly panicked and knelt down in front of me. His face that was originally as white as jade was now red, tears rolling down drop by drop. It doesn't matter if you don't have any romantic feelings for me, just please love me. I can't live without you. I've liked you for a long time. You can call me dirty, it doesn't matter if people mock me, I don't care. I don't care if they laugh or despise me, as long as we can be together, I don't care about anything else. Sister, I have always been alone in this life, I have only had you by my side. If now even you don't need me, then what's the point of me living? You don't have any romantic feelings for me, but you've never liked anyone else before, right? We're just living together like before. You marry me, can you try to accept me? I'll definitely do very well, I love you very much. Sister, please love me. I can't live without you. He kept calling me that, his head on my pillow, crying his eyes red. I already knew that he was born to be a crybaby. After so many years, that personality still hasn't changed. The face looking up at me was fragile, weak, pitiful, tears flowing drop by drop, each drop sparkling like pearls. But this time, I won't be soft-hearted, and I also know that I shouldn't be soft-hearted. I pushed him away, took a deep breath, stood up, and said to him, I've finished packing, I'll leave tomorrow. Wenjing said he wouldn't be able to live without me. This wasn't the first time he'd said that, I'd never taken it as true. That night, I cooked dinner as usual, but he didn't come to eat. The night was quiet, and I waited in the room for a long time, having a headache. I remembered 11 years ago, when I first came to his side, wondering how that child who had once caused heartache had become like this. It was true that I had feelings for him, although it wasn't love between a man and a woman, but I had truly treated him sincerely. Now that I remembered his eyes that seemed to be about to shatter, I felt a belated heartache. So I stood up and decided to go find him to talk. Wenjing wasn't in the room. I felt a little worried, and started calling Wenjing's name. I finally found him. He was in the east bathroom, lying in the bathtub, completely naked, completely submerged in water. He hadn't heard me calling because he wanted to commit suicide, and had already passed out in the water. Damn it, is he trying to drown himself? I shouted loudly, rushed over there, wanting to pull him out. The bathtub was very deep, and very slippery, and he wasn't wearing any clothes, I couldn't hold him. So I stepped into the tub, the sound of water gushing out, I lifted my arms and pulled him up. After struggling to pull him up, I tiredly slid down. I pressed against Wenjing's body so that his back was against the tub, and finally managed to hold him. Then I started patting his face and checking his breathing. Wenjing. Hey, Wenjing. He lowered his head, motionless as if he was dead. I was a little scared, lifted his face up, and started giving him artificial respiration with my mouth. I don't know how many breaths I blew, but finally he coughed and slowly opened his eyes. His face was pale, his expression weak, His eyes were dim and helpless, instantly making me angry. I couldn't help but slap him. "You're really here." His face was completely tilted to one side by my slap, his cheek had clear marks of 5 fingers, his long eyelashes drooped, and he didn't move. Then he didn't care and licked the corner of his mouth. "You don't have feelings for me, and you don't love me, so why do you care if I live or die?" His voice was depressed, whispering as if it had no vitality, very clear but cold. His wet hair was still dripping, flowing down his wet eyes, curling along his face, finally falling onto his chest and dripping into the water. He had never spoken to me in this tone before. His expression was dejected and discouraged. He closed his eyes and refused to look at me, not even bothering to turn his head. My heart was in turmoil, so many emotions were intertwined, feeling extremely bitter. I opened my mouth and said, "What's so bad about living? Now that I'm a doctor with my name on the golden plaque, and I'm so young, there won't be any shortage of beautiful women in the future, right? I don't want to hear you say these words, go away, it's useless to say more. If you're like this, how can I leave?" Although I was angry on the outside, I felt strangely uncomfortable on the inside, and my mood also plummeted. When he heard this, he immediately opened his eyes were misty with tears, and he started to look at me in fear again. "Sister, are you really that heartless? You'd rather let me die than be my wife?" His voice trembled as he spoke, seemingly with great difficulty. His expression was frightened, his voice filled with panic, extremely weak. "Do you really not have any feelings for me? Wenjing, I treat you like a close older brother." For some reason, my voice was also a bit choked and sobbing. He smiled, his eyes red. The hand that was on the edge of the tub slowly grabbed my waist and lifted me up. My body that was close to him moved away from him, then he wrapped his arms around my waist, lifted me up and pressed me against him again. When our bodies were close together, he whispered in my ear, "To me, you're just like a close sister." "I don't believe it." His breath lingered by my ear, his chest and strong body pressed me further. He laughed again, "Unless you prove it to me." The water in the tub should have been cold long ago, but for some reason I still felt extremely hot, just froze and looked at him blankly. What can you do to prove it?" "I know." His lips vaguely caressed my cheek. Following that kiss he took one of my hands, our 10 fingers intertwined and slowly sank into the water. My head was buzzing, confused and not understanding what was going on. I trembled and said, "Wenjing, what are you doing? Don't be like this. You're 8 years older than me, and you're my sister. What's there to be ashamed of?" When I was little, I teased him, and now I finally got my retribution. I couldn't tell if it was sweat or water on my body. In 800 years of being a monster, I had never been so miserable. I knew he was deliberately trying to trick me, and I didn't have the strength to resist, so I had to admit defeat. "I agree to marry you, let go." He looked at me motionless, his black eyes calm, then suddenly smiled, hugged me even tighter, his breath warm, his lips close. "Sister, I want to kiss you." 16, when Wenjing was 19, I married him. We set off for Qingqi County in Jizhou. Before leaving, I went to say
goodbye
to Xiaoweiwei and Xiaohuai, and sighed, I might have to wait until Wenjing dies before I can return. At most, it will only be a few decades. Human life is very short, and in the blink of an eye, it will be gone. Xiaoweiwei and Xiaohuai nodded. It was clear that in their eyes, a few decades were very short, and not worth much. Xiaoweiwei said, "Remember to make yourself look a little older. If you keep looking like this, you will scare people." "Okay, I know." "Xiaoyu, sister, the young master likes you so much. When he dies in the future, will you be miserable?" I patted her head. How can a cultivator be disturbed by love? In my eyes he is just like all other living beings. When fate ends, it will end. There is no difference. I remained calm like this. In my eyes, a life of marriage with Wenjing was just a journey like flowers in a mirror, moon in water. Flowers in a mirror, moon in water are not real flowers and moons after all. I still have to return to my 3 caves. With such thoughts in mind, Wen Jing and I went to Qingqi County, which was very far away. That place was very far from Beishan, very far from the capital, but it was also a bustling place. The eaves of the government office stretched out, majestic and imposing. The county market was bustling with people coming and going, the shops were colorful, the cries of wares were endless, everything was for sale. Wen Jing's official position was not high, he was a county magistrate. The courtyard we rented wasn't very big, and we lived in Shishir Alley in the east of the city. Although there were only 2 rooms, the place was quite small, but I always kept it clean, just like when we were in Peach Village. Wen Jing hugged my waist from behind, apologetically saying to me, "Don't worry, we're only staying here for a while. There will definitely be a bigger courtyard in the future. I will let you live a good life." His salary wasn't high, and we didn't even have maids or servants, so it was still the same as before. We had to do everything ourselves. I didn't see any problem with this, so I just said to him, "We've been living like this before, right? Why are you acting like this just by changing to another place?" Perhaps it was because I wasn't willing to marry him, so my attitude towards him wasn't as good as before. I always liked to give him a disdainful glance. Not only did he not feel disgusted, he instead looked at me with enthusiasm, his face grinning. "Your disdainful glance this time is not as good as last time. When you glance at me, you should glance sideways. When you open your eyes, don't be too fast. When the whites of your eyes are exposed, you should pause for a moment. Remember to glance better next time, do your best." In the past, I was a very good-natured monster, but after marrying him, I suddenly became very fond of biting people. Every time he angered me, I couldn't help but grab his arm and bite him. He took the opportunity to lock my arm, leaned into my ear and joked, "If you like biting me so much, I don't mind letting you bite me back at night. I'll let you bite as much as you want." The way Wen Jing and I got along gradually became strange. He wasn't that kind of person before, but now he was extremely smug and happy in front of me. Fortunately, he didn't often anger me at home. The newly appointed official was an official who had to assist County Magistrate Zhao at the government office. Not only did he have to listen to his orders, he was also responsible for household registration documents, grain and horse warehouses, tax collection, and various other tasks. The officials in this area were mainly old officials who had worked here for many years. County Magistrate Zhao was over 40 years old this year, and had great authority. He had been the county magistrate here for 12 years. The county magistrates, registrars, and envoys, although their ranks were lower than Wen Jing, still looked down on this young magistrate. Obviously, the old devils secretly bullying the new devils were definitely there. Wen Jing didn't tell me these things. After returning, he only told me a few interesting stories in the yamen. For example, in the inspection office there was a yamen named Sun. Although he was a tall and strong man with a beard, his name was Sun Chunhua. In Qingqi, there were 2 county magistrates. Their official positions were all bought with money, one used to raise horses, the other used to set up a fortune-telling stall. County Magistrate Zhao had a daughter who was the concubine of the Jizhou Prefecture governor, Lord Liang. Lord Liang was over 50 years old, while County Magistrate Zhao's daughter was only 18. Wen Jing said, "In the future we will have a bigger yard, he will give me a good life." He didn't just talk, he only used 3 years to rise from the county magistrate to the county magistrate. When he was inspecting the autumn harvest, he reported the embezzlement of County Magistrate Zhao to the imperial censor from the capital. He was very smart, he knew that the imperial censor was a confidant of the emperor. The national treasury was not short of silver, but the emperor's treasury was very short of silver. I don't understand the affairs of the officialdom, so of course I don't know when Wen Jing started planning, when he started collecting evidence and trustworthy confidants. In the end, he pulled all those people, including the prefect, Lord Liang, down from their official positions. The capital sent an official to read the imperial edict, Wen Jing became the county magistrate of Qingqi. It was said that he was an official in the imperial palace. He seemed to be very familiar with Wen Jing. He said with regret, if he hadn't offended Prince Qingzi back then, how could Lord Wen's official career have ended here? That year, in the imperial examination, the emperor was very impressed with you. The path to becoming an official ends here, meaning that Wen Jing can only be a county magistrate in his entire life, and will not be promoted again. It seems that he doesn't care much. Even if he is a 7th-rank county magistrate, he is satisfied. We moved to the county office's residence. This place has a very large courtyard, many rooms, and the scenery is also very beautiful. Beside me, there are 2 maids serving me, 4 rough servant grandmas, and some other servants. Rough servant grandmas are female servants who do heavy work. Above is the county magistrate, below are the guards of the office. Even a child begging at a street stall calls me county magistrate's wife. Wen Jing is now 22, and has become more profound and mature than before. He wears a red official uniform, handsome, with a cold expression, wearing a cloak that exudes a terrifying aura. Everyone is in awe. Since he was no longer as busy as before, he often stood in the long corridor of the courtyard to feed the fish in his free time. The 9th-rank inspector of the county office, named Sun Chunhua, was a tall man with a goatee. He was 2 years younger than Wen Jing and was a capable person. That day, I was free and had nothing to do, so I went to the fish pond. From afar, I saw the 2 of them talking. Lord Sun was very sad. He was already 20 years old and still had not started a family. He said that he liked someone, but that girl did not have feelings for him. He could not force her. I was very far away and saw Wen Jing feeding the fish. The handsome magistrate of Qingqi County smiled calmly and said indifferently, after all, women are still soft-hearted. If she does not like you, then you should make her pity you. If you like someone, you must have her even if it means death. He spoke slowly, his expression indifferent, throwing food into the pond for the carps to rush forward and grab. He watched with delight as they snatched the food, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the railing, his happy mood clearly showing on his face. In that instant, I suddenly understood his true character. Being gentle and kind is all an act, crying is also an act. He is clearly a person who is willing to do anything to achieve his goals. Just like that year when he took the imperial examination, he deliberately pretended to be ignorant so he passed the imperial examination with the 6th rank on the golden list. Because he knew that he was still very young, extremely enthusiastic, and still had no wife, if his name was in the top 3, he would definitely not be able to escape the fate of having to marry someone else. But unexpectedly, the little princess of the Qingzi Wang liked her at first sight, and noisily demanded to marry him. The prince was famous for loving the princess, so he personally went to see Wen Jing, wanting to test his character. As a result, Wen Jing acted extremely rudely that day, prying and criticizing the little princess. The Qingzi Wang was extremely angry, so the doctor who was supposed to be kept in the capital as an official was demoted to a county magistrate in a faraway place. We only learned about all of this later. At that time, I was already 31 years old, a real married woman. Van Can still liked me like before, treated me very well. One morning, when combing my hair, he found a silver hair on my head and was very surprised. I glanced at him, smiled lightly, but there was no joy in it. Do you think I'm old? His expression quickly changed, grabbed my hand and said, no, in my heart you will always be the same. I touched his face, unable to hold back a sigh. Wen Jing, you're still so young. The Qingqi County magistrate was so young, but even though he had been married for 4 years, he still had no children. I once sat and talked with the Xiaohuayao group about human etiquette and rules, discussing the saying, leaving the capital and going against the path, will surely not survive. Leaving the capital and going against the path, departing from the standards, going against the principles. Although I am a monster, but being human for a long time, I still have to endure the constraints of the world. The newly appointed prefect Yu came here to hold a banquet. When Jing took me along, while drinking tea with the officials, the prefect's wives glanced at me. As the main wife, you should be generous. If there is no movement for 3 years, you should know how to think for your husband and take the initiative to take a concubine for him. Otherwise, if your husband raises someone else outside, wouldn't that be like slapping himself in the face? It's your fault for not having a son to continue the family line. If you're still jealous, then it's even worse. Which man doesn't want a child? If we wait another 2 years, Lord Wen will be impatient and have bad feelings towards you. He will resent you and hate you. Don't be so selfish. Be a little smarter. Why does he only have one woman, you? What a daydream. Those ladies kept criticizing me, because their husbands all had concubines, so they couldn't accept that when Jing didn't take anyone. They also couldn't stand that when Jing was devoted to me. If I couldn't have it, then you couldn't have it either. Of course, I wouldn't pay attention to these words and just laughed it off. But I don't know when, I realized that I was gradually assimilated. Van Can is a human, he is still young. How can he not have a child in such a long life? I am really selfish, going down the mountain to repay a favor but accidentally causing Van Can to have no descendants. Isn't that the same as disappointing Mr. Van? Moreover, does Van Can really not want a child? What's the point of a monster like me fighting with a human for a husband? I should take a concubine so that he can have a child, so that he won't have to suffer a scandal and be pointed at by others. Let him live a full life without regrets. After making up my mind, I chose a maid to serve me named Kim Nok. She is 16 years old this year, beautiful, with clear eyes and eyebrows, and can read and write. More importantly, every time she meets Van Can, just calling her sir twice makes her cheeks turn red. I asked her if she wants to be Van Can's concubine. At first she was stunned for a moment, then her face turned red all the way to her ears, and she said, following Madame's orders. So that evening, I asked Wen Jing. He was taking off his coat and hanging it on the coat rack. Hearing that, he was shocked, walked straight to me, leaned against the bed and looked at me, calmly saying, "Are you serious?" I nodded. He suddenly laughed, climbed onto the bed, his legs parted and he knelt on my lap, reaching out to press my hands down. "Do you know what this concubine means?" He looked at me quietly, his eyes heavy. "I am no longer yours alone. You will have to share your husband with someone else. The things I did to you, I will also do to her." I was pressed down by him, unable to move. I lowered my head and said, "I am not an idiot, of course I know." "Does that mean you are willing to accept everything?" "Yes, I am willing." It had been many years since I had seen him cry. The 23-year-old Wen Jing gently let go of my hand, covered his eyes for a moment. When he lowered his hand to look at me, his eyes were red. He sobbed and said, "After all these years, you still don't like me? You don't have any feelings for me? Is your heart made of stone that I have never been able to warm it up? The prefect, you sent women to me, I didn't accept them. The prostitutes who fell into my arms I also pushed away. But you are so generous, you quickly took a concubine for me. Wen Jing, I'm old, I can't give birth. Did I say I wanted to have children? Don't I know if you can give birth or not?" He suddenly got angry, his red eyes suddenly shed tears, then he unexpectedly lowered his head and bit my shoulder hard. I was a little hurt, so I wanted to push him away, but unexpectedly he pressed his head back harder, pressing his face close to my neck. "Sister, I never thought about having children from the beginning." "What?" I was surprised. Wen Jing stopped talking, tears falling on my neck. After a long while, he got up, didn't even look at me, got out of bed and left. Wen Jing moved to the study. He was angry and ignored me. I was a little upset. I didn't want to have a cold war with him at all. Because I suddenly discovered that I was used to sleeping with him every night. Every time I woke up, I would lie in his arms, smelling the familiar fragrance on his body. After noon, it started to drizzle continuously. I told the kitchen to make chicken soup, planning to give it to him later. I had been thinking about it for the past few days, wanting to tell him to forget about the concubine. I would never mention it again in the future. I also wanted to tell him that my heart was not made of stone, it had always been very warm. To me, he was just a love affair, like a passing wind and drifting flowers. If that was the case, then I would treat him a little better in the future so that I wouldn't have any regrets. A monster from the mountains should also have his own opinions. After I finished cooking the chicken soup, I returned to my room and changed into the red rose embroidered shirt that Wenjing liked. I also put some powder on my face. The dignified woman in the mirror was a beauty who had passed her prime. Although her figure was still as well proportioned as before, her cheeks were rosy, but there were still a few faint crow's feet at the corners of her eyes. Her charm was still there. She truly had the appearance of a woman over 30 that I was satisfied with. After changing, I went to the kitchen. But unexpectedly, the bowl of chicken soup that was originally on the table was nowhere to be seen. I was very surprised, so I had to rudely ask the old lady who was busy in the kitchen. She thought, "Just now, miss, you brought it away," saying that Madame had purposely cooked chicken soup for the Lord, so she had sent it to the study. I frowned, feeling a little uncomfortable. Because I clearly remembered that I had not told her to send it to the study. But it was also my own mouth that told her to be Wenjing's concubine. It was truly a sin that one cannot live up to. I sighed, intending to immediately go to the study and explain clearly to Jinyu in front of Wenjing. She was only 16 years old and had a pretty appearance. It was my mistake before, so I might as well give her the contract of sale, return her free status, and help her find a lover that she liked. Marrying Wenjing as a concubine was not a very good thing. I took the maidservant and walked through the long corridor. As long as I walked forward and turned, I could see Wenjing. At that moment, a servant called me over. "Madam, there is a guest looking for you in the front hall." I never expected that I would meet Shen Sishan again in this life. That young Taoist priest was very handsome, his white teeth were even and bright every time he smiled. Now he was no longer that young Taoist priest. One look and you could tell he was a cautious and experienced Taoist priest. Shen Sishan had changed a lot. It seemed like he didn't like to smile anymore, and always kept a solemn expression on his face, extremely serious. As soon as he saw me, he said, "Xiao Yu, I need Madame's help." Something happened. Yuan Ji had escaped. Shen Sishan said that year, after he had captured her in Beishan, he had brought her to Shu so that his master could cast a spell and lock her in the 9 Nether Tower. That was a tower that guarded demons. At first, they planned to suppress and refine her demonic energy. Unexpectedly, Yuan Ji was possessed by a demon. Taking advantage of the fact that her sect was not prepared, she killed several disciples in Minshan and escaped. When he said this, I still hadn't realized the seriousness of the problem. Shen Sishan said again, "There is a barrier in the 9 Nether Tower, which has been holding demons for thousands of years, but Yuan Ji was the first to escape. She must no longer be Yuan Ji now, but that male snake." That year in Beishan, Yuan Ji swallowed Lu Wangqing to actually share his body with him, fusing the two into one. At that time, she was in the crucial period of fusion, so she needed to frantically replenish and hunt living beings. Shen Sishan captured her at the moment when she was at her weakest. No one expected that after being locked up in the 9 Nether Tower, Lu Wangqing would bite Yuan Ji back and become a demon. He took over Yuan Ji's body, and after becoming a demon, he monopolized that body. When he escaped from the 9 Nether Tower, he lost a lot of strength, so all along the way he hunted and killed living beings, eating the inner core in the souls of other monsters. Shen Sishan paused for a moment, he ran from Shu to here. My 3 senior brothers and I chased him to Beishan. But now he is too strong. The creatures of that area are all crying. All my senior brothers are dead, only I am left. Beishan is his territory, but it is also the madam's territory, so I sought out the madam for help. I didn't care about being Wen Jing's wife, nor did I care about this 31-year-old woman's shell anymore. I shook myself and transformed back into my previous appearance of Lu Xiaoye, the white-clothed Beishan monster, the rabbit spirit. I was born in Beishan, originally just an ordinary rabbit. Then, by some twist of fate, I ate half a pill. I had always lived there. Whenever a mountain wind blew by, I would be at the cave entrance making pills or absent-mindedly sitting in the low temple. I looked at that clear but cold moon, deeply longing to be able to ascend to become a deity. Oh right, at first I also had a bunch of monster friends. But after returning to the old place, the little mouse in the land god temple trembled, telling me that all of them were gone, eaten by General Lu. Little flower demon, Little Ho, even the always arrogant fox demon called Mr. Ho. As long as there were monsters with a little cultivation here, their inner cores were all eaten by Lu Wangqing. Because of that, the morning glory withered, never to bloom again. The locust tree in front of my cave also withered. It was very difficult for Little Ho to grow human limbs. Although my face was cold, my body was constantly trembling. My eyes were red as if about to bleed. I said to Shen Sishan, once we find him, we will also cut him up. Although the terrain of Beishan Mountain was complicated, I knew where Lu Wangqing was. He had occupied a flat dragon vein land on a cliff. He and Yuan Ji moved here together because they had their eyes on this precious feng shui land. For Shen Sishan, finding the dragon's lair was not a difficult task. The difficulty was that the current Beishan was difficult, with dark clouds pressing down on the top, black mist filling the air, all covered in Lu Wangqing's demonic miasma. I transformed into a rabbit, carefully walking forward, leading the way for Shen Sishan. I don't know how long we walked, but we finally saw a giant monster on the cliff that was thousands of feet high. It was a monster. It had dragon horns, sharp claws, and a snake body. It was covered in black mist, its entire body was black, its eyes were fierce, its pupils were blood red. The monster stuck out its tongue, and when it saw us, it wasn't surprised at all. It even laughed, its voice cold and sinister. It was the tone I was familiar with. Lu Wangqing said, I knew you would come, I have been waiting for you for a long time. Obviously he was talking to me. I put my feet on the ground and transformed into human form, then I stood up, looking at him coldly. Lu Xiaoye, you are truly an evil rabbit, your father is also an evil rabbit. I hate rabbits so much. If your father had not taken half of my elixir, I would have turned into a dragon and ascended with Yuan Ji long ago. Why would I have to suffer the fate of falling into the devilish path like this now? I looked into his eyes fearlessly. Didn't you steal the elixir from a monkey? You even killed it? If you can steal it, why can't my father? Rabbits deserve to die. Rabbits should be killed. He stood on the cliff and roared, opening his mouth as big as a blood basin towards me, his eyes so wide that they seemed about to split open. A rabbit also wants to become an immortal. How funny, you exist to fill our stomachs, so continuing to be a trembling rabbit is the meaning of your life. Lu Wangqing, are you crazy? I laughed mockingly. We are all beasts. What's the point of distinguishing between high and low? Heaven and earth created all things, so my fate should also be decided by heaven and earth. Why should it be your turn as a monster who even eats his wife to talk nonsense? Lu Wangqing was completely enraged. He straightened his body, flew towards me in a rage, then opened his mouth wide, wanting to swallow me. I didn't move, just stood there watching like that, and then fell into his stomach. This was the plan that Shen Sishan and I had planned from the beginning. The current Lu Wangqing, even if the two of us joined forces, we still weren't sure we could win. But he had already become a demon, and his end result was certain death. On the cliff, white bones were piled up, there were animals, and there were people too. I brought Shinsishan's 5 talismans with me, which he swallowed into his stomach. Outside, Shinsishan would cast a spell, turning the 5 talismans into heavenly thunder, destroying all his magic power. Only I could do this, because I was a monster. I could hold on to my last breath in my stomach, and then find his inner core. Shinsishan and I both had the determination to die. If I was lucky, I could endure a little longer, avoiding that heavenly thunder. But this chance is very slim. After all, it is in Lu Wangqing's stomach. That day when I was in Beishan, I thought that after the dark clouds pressed down on the top, there would definitely be a torrential rain, washing away this land. Many years later, there might be a demon flower spirit, a demon locust spirit, and an arrogant and haughty fox spirit. These things are very important to me. My name is Lu Xiaoya. I am a rabbit. A rabbit that lives in Beishan. I was struck by lightning and returned to my original form, losing all my cultivation, forever becoming a rabbit. But being able to do this is already very lucky, because Lu Wangqing is dead, and even Shinsishan has passed away. The little mouse in the land god temple named Now Now told me that while Shinsishan was casting a spell, he was pierced by General Lu's claw. But he was very talented, endured to finish casting the spell, and even unexpectedly gave General Lu a slash. Right now, Now Now is my best friend. It was very timid, only daring to live in the land god temple in Beishan. It said, "Sister Yu, it's fine to be a mouse, being timid is fine, at least I'm still living happily." Actually, I really admired it. If I had been an ordinary rabbit from the beginning, I would have been willing to be a rabbit forever. But now I couldn't do that anymore. I really missed someone. Back then, when I left Qingqi to go to Shensishan, I was determined to die together with Lu Wangqing. I hadn't even said
goodbye
to Wen Jing. Because I didn't know how to say
goodbye
to him, I didn't even leave a letter. I had said I definitely wouldn't leave quietly, but now I went back on my word. However, for a rabbit like me to travel thousands of miles to Jizhou was already unthinkable. Maybe I would be eaten by wolves and tigers halfway there. Actually, it's not that I'm afraid of death, but because I can't even recognize the path to get there, so there's no way to get there. An ordinary rabbit is helpless like that. The fate of my life with Van Ken has been broken. My dream of cultivating immortality also ended here. Now I can't even climb a tree. I can only squat on the ground, look up at the sky, watch the moon, and sigh deeply. God wants me to accept my fate as an ordinary rabbit. In a cave, I cry in pain for my tragic fate. But life still goes on. I eat carrots like before, living from day to day. Lately, I suddenly miss Van Ken so much. I miss the image of Van Ken when he was 8 years old, 13 years old, 15 years old, and even his tearful appearance when he was 19 years old.
Ah,
sister, please love me. Without you, I can't live. He is now 25 years old. He certainly won't seek death like before. That calm and cautious Qingqi County magistrate is now a grown man. He definitely won't do such things again. Moreover, what if his suicide in the bathtub that year was self-made? I sighed. In this life we probably won't meet again. We can only remember him through old memories. Knowing that, I would have treated him better. I often go down the mountain, running to the village where Wen Jing and I used to live. Our yard is now desolate, quiet, covered with grass and moss. There is even a hole in the window. No one has patched it. Now, I can't fix it. I can only look through that hole at the dark room inside, then turn around and leave. I think I probably understand what love between a man and a woman is. Lately, I have been missing Van Ken so much. That longing is so intense that it never goes away. I can't eat much radish or green grass. I have become very thin. I miss my Van Ken. I miss that evil child so much. When I was a human, I didn't understand what love was. Now I understand, but I'm just a rabbit. Forget it. Why talk so much? Just bang my head and die. I don't want to live anymore. Being a rabbit is so uncomfortable. I miss Van Ken so much. It's so painful. It's so uncomfortable. That little mouse Nao Nao always sways in front of me to help me stop being sad, inviting me to dance happily with it. Oh my God, that ignorant mouse is so happy. How could my heart be so evil? Why should I scold it for being ignorant? It's useless to continue living like this. I intend to seek death. I return to my house with Van Ken in Dao Village. I want to fast for a few days and then quietly leave here. But from afar I saw something. Our door was open. I hurriedly used all my strength to run there, my heart pounding madly. Oh well, there was no one. Wait, whose chest was on that bamboo chair? Why did it look so familiar? When Jing was back, I was sure he was back. I searched every corner but couldn't find him, so I curled up in the house, waiting for a long, long time, so long that I shivered from the cold. It was already dark, but he still hadn't appeared. Where did he go? I lowered my head and thought, then suddenly jumped up. I ran into the mountains again, to the place where Huainan Wang ascended that year, the place where Wen Jing and I often went to pick herbs. As expected, I met him. Beside the thatched cottage in the mountain pass, streaks of moonlight gently flowed down from above like water, embracing the man lying on the grass. He was quiet as if he had fallen into a deep sleep. It had only been 2 years since we last saw each other, but Wen Jing had already lost weight. Why is he so thin but still so heartbreakingly beautiful? His eyelashes are still long, his nose is still high, his face is still as white as before. His eyes that suddenly opened are still as deep and soul-sucking. A small rabbit is lying next to his ear, our eyes looking at each other. Van Ken narrowed his eyes, his thin lips slightly curved. He reached out and grabbed my 2 ears and lifted them up.
Ah.
I'm a little scared. He won't hurt me, right? No, after all, since I was little I taught him not to eat rabbits. Not to bully rabbits. Must love rabbits. Must protect rabbits. Van Ken put me on his chest, put his arms around me and hugged me. The little rabbit was stunned, obediently lying on his chest. Damn it, why is the scent on his body still so pleasant? His chest is still as warm as before. Even the tears, why is he suddenly crying? I tried to pull my head out of his arms, looking at him in surprise and confusion. He just silently looked at me, his eyelashes wet, his black eyes shimmering with tears. Then, he pressed my head into his arms again, hugging me tightly to his chest. Van Ken closed his eyes. It seemed like he was very tired. It seemed like I was also very, very tired, intending to lie down close to his chest and sleep for a while. The gentle moonlight shone on us, the smell of grass drifted up, carrying the faint scent of earth in the air. There was a gentle wind whispering, gently caressing my ears. Wait. This guy's hand. Where is it going? What is he touching a rabbit for? No touching. I wriggled, intending to jump away, but he pressed me back. I caught a glimpse of his slightly raised mouth, his mouth trying to hold back mocking laughter.
Oh no.
This guy is really sick. Wen Jing carried the bamboo chest on his back, carrying me back to Qingqi. I pressed my head against the gap, looking at the increasingly distant Beishan, the undulating hills and mountains. I didn't know what his purpose was in returning. I only knew that he had been traveling day and night, and had brought a rabbit with him, as a treasure, to Qingqi County. He wore a bright red official robe, asterisk. His face was clear but cold, still the same handsome man with a secretive mind. Official robe, the outer garment of an official uniform. I became his pet. He often hid a rabbit in his wide sleeve. When he was on the court solving cases, his slender hand would reach into his sleeve, happily touching my fur. When he went to take a bath, he also carried me along. When he saw me fall into the bathtub, he laughed happily, then used me as a brush to scrub the dirt off my body. He comfortably sighed, much softer than a brown brush. I suspected that he was doing it on purpose, and even guessed whether he already knew my identity or not. Sure enough, one time when he was teasing me, he suddenly blurted out, "Sister, now you." Before he could finish his sentence, he realized he had misspoken, and then smiled brightly again. My eyes widened, extremely doubtful, unable to understand how he knew. When he saw my stupid face, he smiled brightly, lifted me up, and kissed me hard on the forehead. What should I do now? Lu Xiaoya, even if you are a rabbit, I still like you. I couldn't speak human language anymore, so there were many things I wanted to ask him but couldn't. It seemed like he didn't intend to tell me even though he had brought me here to raise by his side. Wen Jing had many secrets. He took me to every place, except for the building in the west of the backyard. Every evening at dusk, he would go there and stay there for an hour. When he returned, he changed into another set of clothes, and his body smelled of incense after bathing. I was confused and didn't understand, really wanting to know what was in that tower. Then I got what I wanted. There was a woman in the tower. It was Kim Nok. A year ago, Van Ken had taken her as a concubine. But he locked her in the tower, not allowing her to go out, nor allowing others to see her. The reason I knew was because when I was running around the county office, I heard two maids secretly gossiping. Guess if the Lord likes Nok or not. If he does, why does he lock her up, not allowing anyone to see her? And if he doesn't like her, why does he come to visit her every day? He definitely does. Haven't you heard the saying, a golden house hides a beauty? The tower in the backyard has 3 floors, resplendent with gold and silver, and has everything inside. Madam is so pitiful, suddenly disappeared 2 years ago and couldn't be found. The emotions in my heart were extremely complicated. I thought of that beautiful, elegant 16-year-old girl. I simply couldn't be a human anymore. If Wen Jing had taken her as a concubine, then he should treat her well. Why lock her up? Recently, the number of times Wen Jing came to the pavilion in the backyard gradually increased. I was angry with him, and dejectedly lay on the table, ignoring him. Until one day, he grabbed my ear, "Sister, I'll take you to a great place." Immediately after, he took me to the pavilion in the west. Damn it! I tried my best to stretch my legs, expressing my objection. He ignored my struggling and ordered someone to unlock the door. It was just as the maid had said that day. This place was resplendent with gold and splendor. There were 3 floors in total, even the walls were glowing red. Wait, red light. My eyes scanned the surroundings warily, my nose sniffed and I was extremely frightened. Sandalwood, cinnabar, realgar, gastrodia alata, ghost doctor, peach blossom, along with the smell of blood. Since I was young, Van Ken had followed me up the mountain to pick herbs. Although he later went to study to become an official, he was very smart. He knew all kinds of medicinal recipes like the back of his hand. These were all things enough to kill hundreds of demons and monsters. He even mixed them with fresh blood and pasted them on the wall. It was truly a terrifying golden house hiding a beauty. I widened my eyes. Unfortunately, I couldn't speak now, couldn't ask the question I wanted to ask. Wen Jing rubbed my rabbit head. "Sister, a year ago the maid beside you suddenly went crazy. She came to find me, said you were a monster, and said she knew your whereabouts. Her behavior was strange, so I locked her up, took a concubine just to hide from other people's eyes."
Ha! 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 Ha!
Lu Xiaoya, you know right, because of Lu Wangqing, I gave up on becoming an immortal. Cultivated with him, after his head was cut off, all my cultivation was lost. Like you now, I could only turn into an ordinary snake. I couldn't bear it, couldn't bear to abandon him, so I was willing to share my cultivation with him, share my body with him, even if I had to turn into a monster. But because he wanted to monopolize my cultivation and body, he devoured me without hesitation. He didn't care about my life or death. His actions were extremely vicious. I couldn't hold on for a long time. He swallowed me up and left me with almost nothing, only a bit of my soul wandering around. After that Taoist died, you turned into a rabbit. I didn't mind traveling thousands of miles to find the child you raised, just to know what the word love is in this world? What right do you have to get what I can't have? Why is it you? Yuan Ji collapsed to the ground and cried loudly, twisting her whole body, in great pain. I did everything for him, why did he treat me like this? We grew up together, playing together in the forest. I was once caught by a snake hunter before, he would rather be caught with me than save me. Heaven and earth can witness our love, why did it end up like this now? Lu Xiaoye, you were right, you won, but you won't win forever. Becoming a deity is a tribulation. If he was willing to die for you, then how could you avoid this tribulation? Yuan Ji's remnant soul completely disappeared. I finally understood what she had done. She did not mind the hardships, traveled thousands of miles to Qingqi, entered Jin Yu's body, told Wen Jing, you have married a demon, did all of that just to verify the word love. She longed to see Wen Jing's frightened expression, wanted to see the fear, horror, nausea and disgust appear on his face. But Wen Jing did not act as she wished, he was not even afraid of her at all, still leisurely sat in a room drinking tea and asked, and then? How could humans not be afraid of demons? Yuan Ji did not believe it. She thought of another way to test the limits of human hearts. Lu Xiaoyu is a rabbit in Beishan. You can go back there to find her and bring her here. If so, I will teach you to use your lifespan to refine pills and help her cultivate. Do you want it? Are you serious? Wen Jing smiled, a trace of joy flashing across his face. Yuan Ji's eyes instantly flared up with a fierce anger. What are you laughing at? If you use your lifespan to refine pills, it means she will suck your life, and you will die. Wen Jing let out an "oh" and stood up. His figure was as tall and straight as bamboo. He kept smiling and looking at her, but his eyes were extremely cold. If you lie to me, I will make sure you will never be able to reincarnate. A half-smile flashed across the man's handsome face, hidden deep within was a vicious and crazy look. At that moment, Yuan Ji suddenly felt a little regretful. She suddenly realized that she had found the wrong person, this man was even crazier than her. He was willing to use his life to save his wife. Not only was he willing, this man was also impatient, extremely hasty, hoping to do it as quickly as possible. She offered herself to him, and was locked in this building by him. He was afraid that she would escape, so he locked the 3 floors below, drawing things that were enough to kill hundreds of demons and monsters. Yuan Ji was extremely regretful. She should not have come to find him. This guy was a lunatic, even monsters that fell into his hands would have to give up. He was more respectful than anyone else. He set up an alchemy furnace in the building, immersed himself in incense all day, cut his hand and used his blood to refine that pill. He imprisoned Yuan Ji here, forcing her to watch the alchemy furnace day after day, not allowing the slightest mistake to happen. He squatted in front of Yuan Ji, arrogantly looking at her, showing a warm, gentle smile. Come here, let us witness my love for you. Yuan Ji suddenly felt like he was more of a monster than herself. She knew that she would not be able to escape, she would definitely die here. In the end, after that incident, she died. That long-refined pill had finally succeeded. I refused to eat it. When Jing frowned, he used his hand to force my mouth open, crushed it piece by piece, and stuffed it into my mouth. Tears welled up in my eyes. He just silently looked at me like that, his voice filled with warmth. Sister, when I was young, you asked me what I wanted to do when I grew up. I said I wanted to be an official. Look, I am already a district magistrate. Back then, you said you wanted to be a god, right? Then do it, I will help you fulfill that dream, okay? No, I shook my head. He pressed his face close to mine, his voice starting to choke up. Sister, I'm not afraid of anything, I'm not afraid of anything, you just go. Once upon a time, there was a rabbit in Beishan. It ate an elixir and cultivated into a human. Later, because it killed a possessed snake monster, it became a rabbit again. But later, the child it raised by itself fed it an elixir. That child died at the age of 25. The county magistrate of Qingqi was elegant and graceful, young and talented. He was buried in Beishan, where the Huainan king ascended to heaven. I often visited him. I was that rabbit. My name was Lu Xiaoye. That bad boy, he was an idiot. Cultivating into an immortal was not that easy. After he died, I sat on a tree every day, looking up at the sky to watch the moon, shaking my legs. Now I can transform into a human. In the blink of an eye, many years have passed, from a noisy little mouse, now gradually became an old mouse, then passed away due to old age, and I am still a rabbit spirit. In this life, I definitely cannot become an immortal. That evil child also told me not to miss the chance to become an immortal. He thought the pill he refined was so formidable. I really hated him. When he died, while lying in my arms, he deliberately stabbed me, causing me to ache. While coughing up blood, he said, "Our family has no relatives in Jiangling, and there is no Lu Xiaoye in Jiangling. Sister, can't monsters really give birth to children for humans? Is it because they can't give birth, or because they don't want to give birth? Sister, have you never loved me, for real?" I hugged him tightly, crying silently. I said, "You're wrong, you're really wrong. Don't die, I'll give birth to your child, and we'll never be apart again. You're lying, you never keep your promises, you always quietly leave." He coughed up a mouthful of blood, his voice getting smaller and smaller. "You can just become an immortal, I don't want to love you anymore." Thinking back, he had been dead for 30 years now. Every day I look at the moon and sigh. Until that evening, when the moonlight shone throughout the forest, embracing the endless mountains that stretched out to the horizon, I saw a silver-haired man standing there smiling. That person was as beautiful as a fairy, his sleeves fluttering in the wind, his voice clear. "This little rabbit, I saw you on the moon, you have been watching me for nearly 1,000 years. I looked at that person in surprise. "You are a fairy on the moon?" He laughed. "How am I like a fairy?" "I am the jade rabbit on the moon, we are originally from the same family. The jade rabbit on the moon has always been the place I have always looked forward to." Now that he suddenly stood before me, I suddenly did not know what to say. "Oh, hello old ancestor, I am Lu Xiaoye. I was originally an ordinary rabbit, my father stole half of the immortal pill before and gave it to me, but until now I am still like this." "Hayes, cultivating immortality is so difficult. How did you become an immortal in the past? Can you teach me a little?" He carefully recalled and said to me, "Me? At first I was just an ordinary rabbit, then I met 3 old men who were about to starve to death, so I jumped straight into the fire and used my body as food for them." "Yes? That's right, it's true, those 3 old men were Tai Bok, Lao Quan and Nam Cuc Chan Quan respectively, that's why I became an immortal." This way of becoming an immortal left me speechless. The jade rabbit laughed again. "When the time comes, it's time to become an immortal, it's not as difficult as you think." After he finished speaking, he gave me a small, transparent, shimmering pill. "Here's this Cap Hone. Legend has it that on the moon, there is a rabbit, holding a jade pestle, kneeling to pound medicine, creating Cap Hone. If eaten, it can make one immortal." I looked at him in a daze. He raised his head and smiled. "Let's go, the moon is high tonight, round like a jade tray, very suitable for becoming an immortal." He extended his hand towards me. I stood there for a long time, then reached out and held his hand tightly. The moon tonight was high, round like a jade tray, very suitable for becoming a fairy. Look, I finally got my wish. End of main part. Side story: When Jing had been sick for 3 days. Because of hunger, his stomach gradually felt hot, burning his limbs and body. He curled up his small body, hugging the blanket and shivering. The bones in his body ached so much, it felt like they were about to be crushed. Ever since his grandfather passed away, this was not the first time he had been sick. Just like in the past, without money to buy medicine, if you can bear it, you will live, if you can't bear it, you will die. The damp sweat on the mattress and blanket mixed with the musty smell, turning into a fierce nightmare, sucking his whole body into a writhing pain. He was only 8 years old, very afraid that he would just die. But he couldn't do anything, he could only, like last time, start to think hazily, who knows, maybe a kind doctor will come by, give him a bowl of medicine and a steamed bun. This chance was probably lower than meeting a god. It was all wishful thinking anyway. He would rather hope that some kind-hearted deity would come down to earth and save him, seeing how pitiful he was. What would that deity look like? He would have a beautiful bodhisattva face, and when he smiled, his eyes would curve. He would also be able to put his hand on his head and say, "Don't be afraid, everything will be fine." It was at this moment that the 8-year-old Wen Jing heard the sound of the gate being knocked loudly. It was a long time before he woke up in a daze, and he forced himself to open the door. Even several years later, he could still clearly remember her smiling appearance when he first met her. Her petite figure, rosy face, jet black hair, and cherry-like lips. This was Wen Jing's addition after he grew up, to countless dreams about that day. At that time, he was not sure if his family had relatives in Jiangling. But he was certain that she was as good as a goddess from heaven, coming here to save him. She was straightforward and quick to clean the yard and house, and wash his moldy blanket. He could still smell her scent lingering on it. It was the lingering scent of the earth on a warm spring day. Since she came here, he had never been hungry again, nor had he ever been sick. She was very talented, knew how to pick herbs, knew medical skills, and dared to go deep into the mountains. She knew which wild vegetables and mushrooms in the mountains were not poisonous and could be eaten with peace of mind. She had a big heart and was fearless. She could punish Chao Dinyo, whom he feared the most. She also told others that if they did evil, karma would punish them. The two of them lived together for several years. She was naturally generous and loved to laugh. She even bought a big brown toothbrush from the market, and every time she scrubbed him, it hurt. Wen Jing clenched his loincloth and saw her cheerful expression. He wanted to remind her, but in the end, he didn't say anything. Forget it, it was good that she was happy. After all, he had been bullied by others since he was young, and could bear anything. The Wen Jing of the past often cried, but he usually only did so in places where there were no people. When he was still alive, in order not to make him worry, he often held back his tears in front of him. But he didn't know why. When he came to her, even the slightest grievance would make his eyes red and he would choke and sob. Perhaps it was because she was too gentle, and loved him too, stroking his head, caressing his face, gently comforting him. Actually, he really liked having her stroke his head. He often felt a strange sense of satisfaction in his heart. He loved her, relied on her, trusted her like that. She said that the weak should not be afraid, so thanks to that firm voice, he was born with limitless courage. That's right, he shouldn't be afraid. She was a woman and yet so strong. He was a man. In the future he would definitely have to protect her, and also be her solid support. Wen Jing wanted to become an official, a high-ranking official. This was his dream since he was very young. Before, he thought that being an official would give him the power to punish others with a stick, and he could drag out all the bad guys or bullies in the village to beat them. Later, he thought that being an official would give him a gradual promotion, a big house, and a salary in silver, so that from now on his sister could eat well and dress well, and would no longer have to work hard to go up the mountain to pick herbs. He studied hard and finally lived up to everyone's expectations. At the age of 13, he took the exam and came out on top in the district, catching the eye of Bachelor Ching. Bachelor Ching said he could move to the library, but he didn't go. Because he couldn't rest assured that his sister would stay home alone. From the age of 8 to 13, Wen Jing changed a lot. Thinking back, it was probably because he read a lot of books, understood everything, and achieved good results at a young age, so he wasn't as self-conscious as before. He became very calm, and his personality became more cautious. Only she still maintained her kind appearance as before, would give medicine to the villagers who came to beg, would quietly crawl up to the roof of the Chow family's house next door, and give steamed buns and eggs to the old lady of the Chow family in the dilapidated wood-burning room. She would crawl up on the roof, her butt raised, the hem of her pale yellow skirt resembling the color of flowers swaying to welcome the spring. Every time like this, Wen Jing would laugh and cry, afraid that someone would find out, so he would carefully guard her. He was not at ease leaving her alone at home, and he did not want to leave her alone at home. In recent years, he had long gotten used to seeing her kindly asking after returning home, asking if he was tired today, if he had a lot of homework. She would go into the kitchen to cook, and he would read by the window, watching her busy figure. After dinner, if the moonlight was clear, she would sit in the yard grinding medicine, or lazily lie on the chair and look up at the moon. Under the moonlight, her expression was always unusually reverent. Wen Jing knew that she liked the moon, always looking towards it. She also liked rabbits. When he was young, when he went to the mountains, she often told him not to catch rabbits, not to bully them. Rabbits didn't do anything bad, at most they would only eat a few radishes. When looking at the moon, she always had different thoughts from ordinary people. She said, on the moon there was a cinnamon tree, under the cinnamon tree there was a jade rabbit. The jade rabbit was pure and beautiful, holding a jade pestle, kneeling on the ground pounding medicine, making it into caphone, eating it could make one immortal. Who knows, maybe one day, she would also stand on the moon, in the same place as the jade rabbit, looking down on the human world. Although her tone was joking, every time like this, Wen Jing always felt that she was a bit strangely absent-minded. He remembered her saying her ambition was to become a fairy. He felt amused. But he still opened his mouth and said to her, if you become a god, I will worship and dedicate a temple to you, and stay in the temple every day to watch over you, not leaving you even an inch. When she heard that, she couldn't help but cover her mouth and laugh, overjoyed. Wen Jing didn't tell her, protecting her even an inch was his true thought. They had lived together for several years, he had never thought of leaving her. He had also never thought that she would abandon him. So when she opened her mouth and said she wanted to go find her father who was a wandering doctor, and would return in less than half a year, he believed it was true. Wen Jing couldn't bear it, so he didn't move to the library, afraid that when she returned, he wouldn't be able to see her immediately. Every day, he would return home from the library, looking forward to her suddenly appearing in the house, asking him how he was today, if he was tired or not. Half a year later, she still hadn't returned. He began to panic. He immediately went to all the medical clinics in town to ask, then went to the south of Zhejiang County as she said, and returned after 3 months. But he still couldn't find her, she still hadn't returned home. Wen Jing was scared and uneasy. He hated himself. Although she was naturally very brave, daring to go out alone to look for someone at the age of 16, she was just a girl after all. Why didn't he go with her, leaving her alone? What if she encountered bandits? What if she encountered bad people who cheated her of her money? What if someone robbed her of her beauty? Wen Jing couldn't calm down at all, he started to collapse, couldn't eat well, couldn't sleep well, and lived in fear every day. 3 months later, when she returned, he was sick beyond recognition. He cried again. In front of her, he always loved to cry, like a child. Only when she promised that she would never leave without a trace again did he raise his head and say to her, "Sister." No matter where you go from now on, can you take me with you? Without you, I won't be able to live for long. Without you, he wouldn't be able to live. He knew that she didn't take her words seriously. He also knew that what he said was true. The worry and fear that had lasted for half a year was about to destroy him. If she didn't come back, he would be scared and die. Wen Jing had planned to marry her since he was 15. He had read the books of the sages, so he understood that this thought was evil. After all, everyone knew that she was 8 years older than him. She had watched him grow up, and she was his older sister. But so what? The books of the sages couldn't make him tremble. Those dark thoughts made his emotions surge, and his blood seemed to boil. People live a lifetime, the precious things are already few and far between. It is simply a cycle of choosing or giving up. If he can live with her, he is willing to offer his sincerity in exchange for it. Etiquette and reputation are all due to it, right? Everyone praises him as a young man with ambition, a scholar with a big heart, but only he knows how vulgar he is. His desires are also very ordinary. Ever since he was in his teacher's mansion, ever since Qingru Lan accidentally fell in love with him, her shy eyes turned towards him, he began to understand the feelings between men and women. No, actually much earlier. He had a dream. In his dream there was her figure, her eyes curved up and smiled at him, making his heart beat fast, extremely panicked. Ever since then, he did not dare to look straight into her eyes. From then until a long time later, he still could not distinguish his feelings for her. Only later could he confirm for sure, and even luckier was that she still didn't understand that kind of love between a man and a woman. For several years, she was still the same, still generous, open-minded, and simple and easy to predict. A few years ago, there were often matchmakers coming to propose marriage. She frowned, saying that she had no intention of getting married. Everyone thought that she was still worried about something, unwillingly guessing countless reasons why she didn't get married. Only Wen Jing knew, because she had no one in her heart. She had never admired any man, so how could she have the intention of getting married? Wen Jing thought of this, and his mood immediately became happy. When he turned 17, in the blink of an eye, he killed Chao. No, there was only one thought in his heart, she was his. Because of this thought, after he entered the capital, he started to make plans. The officialdom in the capital wasn't necessarily good, the exam hadn't even started yet, and the evil in people's hearts had already been completely revealed. Officials secretly bet, students gave gifts and bribes, everyone laughed and talked insincerely. Just one imperial examination, they formed cliques, plotted all kinds of things. Because of these things, he felt disappointed. Of course his dream of becoming a great official was gone. Later, he got what he wanted, was appointed to Qingqi as a county magistrate. He also got to marry his sister as he wished. He thought his life was complete, he had no regrets. Except for not having children. From an 8-year-old child, to a 13-year-old twin brother, or a 16-year-old top scholar in the imperial examination, or a 23-year-old county magistrate. They had been together for 15 years, day and night, never separated. Wen Jing knew that he had deep thoughts, and was also sensitive and suspicious. His sister was 31 years old, she had not changed at all compared to before, she still looked like she did when she first met him when she was 8 years old. Until they arrived in Qingqi, being together for 2 years, she quietly aged. That's right, quietly without fanfare or drums. Day after day, he lived with her endlessly, imitating her face over and over again, kissing her bodhisattva-like face. One day, he suddenly discovered that there were faint wrinkles at the corners of her eyes. There was no doubt that she was still as beautiful as ever. But he still felt confused, not understanding when those wrinkles had appeared. His memory had always been very good, after all, not long ago, her face was still like a young girl in her 20s. Thinking about this, he was even more terrified. Her face had not changed in more than 10 years, and she had never had a period. He had thought that because she was different from normal women, it was probably a symptom of some disease. Later on, his suspicions grew heavier and heavier, so he secretly sent someone to Jiangling. There was no one named Lu Xiaoye. There was also no folk doctor named Lu Qing. It was as if their family had never had relatives in Jiangling. When Jing laughed, he burned the letter sent by the detective, and never had any intention of asking his sister. In short, people sometimes have to turn a blind eye. No need to ask, no need to know anything. As long as she was here, they could be together for the rest of their lives. That was enough. What if after asking, she ran away? What would he do? When Jing did not expect that even though he did not ask, one day his sister would still disappear. At that time, it was because of the matter of taking a concubine that he and his sister had a grudge. The maid named Jinyu brought in the stew, placed it on the table, and said embarrassedly that the madam had asked her to bring it. She had a naturally beautiful face, biting her lips, weak and pitiful. She was so young, only 16 years old. Seeing Wen Jing's cold face and distant expression, she boldly stepped forward, trembling, wrapping her arms around his lower waist, which was wearing an official robe. "My lord. Get lost." In the blink of an eye, Wen Jing pushed her away, his face gloomy, his voice cold. Jinyu's eyes were red, and she left crying. He sat in the study, slapping his forehead and laughing out loud. Even though he had clearly said that he had never thought of having children, she still had not given up the idea of taking a concubine for him. When Jing felt indignant, his anger reaching its peak, he decided to continue to be cold towards her, to let her think carefully. But in the evening, another maidservant who had been following her, ran over in a panic, reporting to him that his wife was nowhere to be found. When Jing had forgotten how he had spent those days, he sent many people, blockaded the town, and investigated one by one. The servant in the mansion told him that there was once a man who came to the front hall to look for his wife, and disappeared after his wife met him. When Jing was helpless, and in a flash he seemed to remember when he was 14 years old, when he faced his sister's departure, without a clue, guessing wildly, both scared and panicked. He knew she had too many secrets. Searching for her was like looking for a needle in a haystack, unless she appeared herself. But this time, could she still come back? He was bored in his room drinking, calling out to his sister, completely drunk. She wouldn't come back. She had said she wouldn't leave quietly again. Liar. Swindler. The world was so big, how could he find her? The person he had lived with since he was 8 years old, and had relied on each other for 15 years, yet he still didn't know who she was. How ridiculous. How ridiculous. Day by day, Wen Jing's spirit became more and more depressed. He looked back at his life and realized that the best days were gradually fading away, and could no longer be found. And the road under his feet was desolate and had no end, but he still had to go straight ahead. Alone. If that was the case, he might as well have been 5 or 8 years old and lived and died on his own. Life and death were up to the heavens. Perhaps she had already gone to work and become a god. Was an abandoned person any different from a stray dog? He had once said that without her, he could not live. When Jing was silent and taciturn, feeling like he was a soulless corpse, dull, without any vitality. Until one day, Jinyu suddenly went crazy. So he started to believe in ghosts and monsters. Not only did he believe, he even laughed. Finally, now he knew her identity. Old stories from the past suddenly came flooding back, and he suddenly felt extremely ridiculous. It was when she seriously told him not to catch rabbits, not to bully them. Rabbits didn't do anything bad, at most they would only eat a few radishes. It was her innocent face under the moonlight. Her ambition was to become a fairy. When Jing recalled the time when he was 8 years old and seriously ill, he had hoped that some kind fairy would come down to earth out of pity for this poor guy and save him. It turned out that his sister wasn't a fairy, and it was hard for her to take care of herself. He had always felt that there was nothing she couldn't do, and that she had never had to rely on him. Finally one day, his sister needed him to save her. She needed him. This thought made Wen Jing shed tears. But they were tears of happiness. Because it turned out that his sister didn't leave on purpose, but that she wanted to do something very important. Also because his sister needed him now. That monster named Yuan Ji came to find him because she doubted his feelings for her. Damn it. Wen Jing laughed out loud. He squatted in front of her, his face arrogant, his voice gentle. Come here, let's witness my love for you. Many years from now, there would no longer be a person named Wen Jing in this world. But before he died, he never regretted it. Everyone will die, but not her, and neither will his love for her. Her wish is to become a fairy, so he will fulfill it for her. You can become a fairy. I don't want to love you anymore. I can't dedicate myself to that temple, sitting there every day to protect her without leaving her side. I can't not be by her side for the rest of my life, living a short life of a few years, often just in the blink of an eye. In the end, we have to part. You go become a fairy. I don't like you anymore. You can live without any worries. Don't worry, I won't be afraid. I won't be afraid of anything. When you stand on the moon, observing the world, you can completely forget that there was once a child named Wen Jing in this world. He won't blame you. Because he loves you with all his heart. On Beishan, the moon is still itself. Not knowing how many years had passed, a locust tree had sprouted new branches. During the day, a merchant association from Izhou came, passing through here, and encountered bandits blocking their goods. The leader of the merchant association was a young master, nearly 15 years old, an upright young man. His name was Li Nanqing, the young master of the Li family of Izhou. This time he followed his elder brother to trade goods, but unexpectedly he encountered bandits ambushing here. The night was quiet, the moon hung in the sky. Li Nanqing and his elder brother got lost in the deep mountains. Then he saw a girl sitting on a locust tree. The girl was propping her cheek up and looking into the distance. He called out to her, and she turned around. Under the moonlight, the girl's face was clear. She looked at him, her expression was stunned for a moment. I am Li Nanqing from Izhou City. May I ask if you know the way down the mountain? The young master was not old, his voice was clear, very polite. He saluted and looked quite dignified and serious. The young lady on the locust tree looked at him for a long time, then suddenly smiled. Of course I know, young master, just climb up here, I will show you the way. The strong and agile young man quickly climbed up the tree 2 or 3 times, and sat at the fork next to her. The young lady sighed and looked at him, pointing under the tree. Young master, there is no shadow. Li Nanqing did not know the reason. He followed the gaze and looked back, his face instantly turned pale. There was no shadow. Memories flashed through his mind like a gust of wind. He remembered being stabbed by a bandit during the day and died. The fear and excitement passed. Li Nanqing's eyes turned red. He was stunned for a long time. The girl still didn't say anything, silently watching the moon. Finally, after recovering his spirit, Li Nanqing accepted his fate. He asked softly, "Are you a human or a ghost?" He finally understood. In the middle of the night, a girl shouldn't appear here. But the girl just sighed, still not answering him. They sat together for a long time. Until the sky was about to light up, the girl slowly said to him, "I am Lu Xiaoya, a rabbit spirit." Li Nanqing looked at her in surprise. Her eyes looked straight at him, a smile appearing and disappearing. "You know, I almost became a fairy." "Then why didn't you become a fairy?" "I gave up, I don't want to anymore." She glanced slightly, sighed softly, "Because I discovered becoming a fairy in my mind and reality are not the same. I'm a bit disappointed, so even if I become a fairy, I won't feel happy. I don't understand, what are you disappointed about? The moon in the sky, clearly so noble, but when I can touch it, it is so ordinary. In fact, it has always been so ordinary, not beautiful at all. My heart is infatuated with it only because my position is too low. She smiled. When talking about a local god who died of hunger, she revealed a sad expression. It's all the same, what's the difference? Li Nanqing frowned, suddenly not knowing what to say. She didn't expect him to say anything, just looked at him, and said, "Does young master like anyone?" Their eyes met. Li Nanqing's expression was a little embarrassed. No, so, is young master engaged or engaged? Never. Huh, is that so? That young lady's face contained an ambiguous smile, staring at him until his face turned red. Someone once told me that as long as I believe wholeheartedly, cut off fate, be sincere, and resolve all the lingering grievances in the mundane world, I will surely attain my path. It seems like I have already accomplished all of that. I have nothing left to lose. I am only one step away from becoming an immortal. But suddenly I feel very scared. Who will I be after becoming an immortal? I cannot let go of my current self. Is the compassion I have realized real or not? If I cannot do it, why force myself? Immortals, monsters, and humans all have their own way of living. It is fine to just be a monster comfortably and freely like this. The young lady calmly looked at him. What about you, young master? Now that you are dead, do you have any wishes that have not been fulfilled? Li Nanqing's eyes suddenly turned red, he pursed his lips, and after a long while, he said, I also have things that I cannot let go of, and I also do not want to die. Is that so? The young lady seemed to be thinking about something, and took out a small transparent pill from her pocket. Eat it and go down the mountain. What is this? Cap Hone, it can help young master revive. Then what do I need in exchange? No need, young master can take it, I don't need it anymore. The young lady smiled and placed the small pill in his hand, gently looking at him, her figure like a wisp of smoke, gradually drifting away.
Goodbye,
little boy. Li Nanqing was stunned as he watched her disappear, and after a long time, he swallowed the pill and turned around to go down the mountain. Being born as a human, there were always too many things that could not be let go of. The feelings between him and his elder brother were very warm. He needed to know if he was still alive or not. His parents were old, the pain of losing two sons was like the sky collapsing. If his elder brother was captured by bandits, he needed to go down the mountain to lead people to rescue him. If his elder brother died, he needed to support the family, to be a solid support for his parents. On the way down the mountain, he walked as if flying, his body as light as a swallow. Suddenly, he stopped. That pill called Cap Hone was an immortal pill. Now that it was taking effect, many familiar images continuously flashed through his mind. One by one, each image flashed through his mind like a lantern, appearing one after another. It was a 15-year-old youth, his eyes were red, his whole body was trembling, tears falling like rain as he turned his head. The deep forest in the mountains, deep and quiet. Surrounded by mountains, his heartbreaking scream echoed all around, "Sister! Sister! Sister!" Accompanying that echo were his staggering footsteps. The young master seemed to have gone crazy, desperately running back to the old place. But the deep mountains and old forests had long since lost the appearance in his memory. She was not waiting for him at the locust tree. He also did not know where she had gone. "Sister! Don't not need me, don't leave me." Lai Nam Khan knelt on the ground, covering his face, choking with sobs. Mountains and rivers have mutual encounters, spring breezes enter the family. Meaning of the above two sentences: in life, there are always moments of meeting each other, whether happy or sad, meeting and parting are an inevitable part of life. The spring wind symbolizes the flow of time and the arrival of a new season, implying new beginnings and challenges in life. He seemed to vaguely hear a sigh. It was the girl in white clothes. Now she was standing in front of him, her face full of helplessness. "Van Can, you crybaby, finish what needs to be done before coming to find me."